It's time for TWiT This Week in Tech. Brianna Wu is here. Cathy, Gellis, our attorney, is here. Rob Pegoraro is here. Lily the dog is here. And we're going to talk about the DOJ versus Apple, Congress versus TikTok, and the state of Tennessee versus AI, the ELVIS Act. It's all coming up next on TWiT. Right? Right. This episode is brought to you by Zscaler, the leader in cloud security. Cyber attackers are now using AI in creative ways to compromise users and breach organizations. In a security landscape where you must fight AI with AI, the best AI protection comes from having the best data. Zscaler has extended its zero-trust architecture with powerful AI engines that are trained and tuned by 500 trillion daily signals. Learn more about Zscaler Zero Trust Plus AI to prevent ransomware and AI attacks. Experience your world secured. Visit zscaler.com/zerotrustai.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiT This Week in Tech, episode 972, recorded Sunday, March 24th, 2024. Judicial Whimsy. This episode of This Week in Tech is brought to you by Ecamm, the leading live streaming and video production studio built for Mac. Now, whether you're a beginner or an expert, Ecamm is here to elevate your video production. From streaming and recording to podcasting and presenting, Ecamm Live is your all-in-one video tool, perfect for simplifying your workflow. Ecamm Live includes support for multiple cameras and screen sharing, plus the live camera switcher lets you direct your show in real time. Honestly, if Ecamm had been around when we started TWiT 19 years ago, I wouldn't be in this studio. I'd be at home using Ecamm Live. Stand out from the crowd with high-quality video, add logos, titles, everything we do here at TWiT, and a lot more. Lower thirds, graphics. You can share your screen. You could drop in video clips. You could bring on interview guests, use a green screen, and so much more. Join the thousands of worldwide entrepreneurs, marketing professionals, podcasters, educators, musicians, and other Mac users who rely on Ecamm Live daily. Get 1 month free when you subscribe to any of Ecamm's plans. Visit ecamm.com/TWiT, ECAMM.com/TWiT, and don't forget to use the promo code TWiT at checkout. It's time for TWiT This Week in Tech, the show where we cover the week's tech news. This is a big week in tech news, so we have assembled an esteemed, a accomplished, a talented, a brilliant panel to figure out what the hell is going on here. Starting with Rob Pegoraro. You know him from the Washington Post, where he was a
long
gutsy
time ago.
consumer reporter.
Former life.
And many other publications. It's great to see you again, Rob.
Thanks
Thank you for joining us. Also with us, a former congressional candidate for the Massachusetts, I can never remember what district it is.
District 8. District 8.
The Nth District. Brianna Wu, she's now executive director of Rebellion PAC. Hello, Brianna.
So good to see you. I always love being on. This is my favorite way to spend a Sunday.
You knew you should come out for GDC because you could have been sitting next to me with Rob and our other panelists.
We could have been partying together. I make very bad decisions, and now they're coming back to bite me.
All right.
I thought you meant party make the decisions together.
I have to point this out before we go. Every time we come, I add a new vintage video game poster to my background. Now we've got Tekken 2. I believe this is from 1990. Was that 1994?
I remember
this
that
is
game.
A real one from Japan.
Yeah.
This is very hard to get.
Look at that haircut. Holy cow.
You should try that, Leo. The Hihachi. You should do that.
Yeah. The Tekken 2 now they kept doing it, right? There's like Tekken 4, 5, 7.
We are at 8.
Yeah.
We're at 8.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't want you to get into your parenting style, but would you throw your son off a cliff like they do in Tekken? Would you do that?
No, I wouldn't do that.
Or would you not?
Unless God told me to. If God told me to, I might.
Okay.
Gotta acknowledge that. Cathy Gellis is also here. CGCounsel.com. She writes at Tech Dirt. She is a lawyer admitted to the bar of the United States Supreme Court. That gives her some standing, I think, to talk about the meat of the matter this week.
Yes.
Cathy, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So for those listening at home, keeping score at home, Cathy and Rob are in studio, which means Brianna is going to have to assert herself to get a wedge into this conversation. But I know you're capable of it, Brianna.
I will do my best.
Do your best. So, of course, the big story of the week. I've been in Cabo San Lucas for the last 12 days. Every day, I just briefly check my phone to see anything happen. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Then the day before I come home, the Department of Justice sues Apple for antitrust. This is a big one. Probably the biggest one since 1998 when the DOJ sued Microsoft for similar antitrust reasons. Now, Rob, you've actually you told me you annotated the 85-page complaint. That is
open right here.
That is a bold.
Well,
thing
I
to do.
highlighted it. Does that count as annotation?
You read it and you made notes.
Yeah, which I'm sure you did as well, Cathy.
It's been a week.
Okay.
It's on my to-do list.
She's on her list. Yeah. She's going to get to it, folks. But that's not going to stop you from having...
I can have an opinion.
Yes, an informed opinion. Brianna, have you read the 85-page complaint?
I want to front with y'all. I have not done this, but I have read all the coverage.
Quite all right.
Yeah. I've read a variety of toots and skeets.
That's really all you need. That's all you need.
I can reflect the takes.
A variety of toots and skeets is all that's necessary.
Right, yeah.
Actually, kind of an interesting commentator on this, Steven Sinofsky, who was the man responsible for the fine Windows 8 debacle at Microsoft. He's left Microsoft and actually become somewhat of an Apple fanboy in the years intervening. And on his blog, he says it's going to come down to basically two parties, and I kind of agree with him. The people who believe big tech is too big and that the federal government has got to rein them in. The people in favor of federal action to break up some of these monopolies or do something about these monopolies. And then the other side is going to be people who love Apple, the cult of Mac, he calls them, who are just going to say, but where's the harm, Your Honor? We're pretty darn happy with our iPhones and our walled garden, and where's the harm? So I guess I should ask each of you first. Let's start with you, Cathy. Are you on one of those two sides, or have you found a middle?
I mean, I'm always on team nuance, so I'm rarely on team big one thing or the other.
Small team, by the way. Team nuance is growing smaller by the day.
Yeah, probably our very particular rules for how you join seems to be an obstacle. But, I don't think it's... the very American thing of if a little is good, a lot must be better is just not, I think, a good way to run a country and have policy. So to have these binaries, are we going to be on team, yes, everything tech does is much better than, versus everything the government do? Like, no, there's a role for government, a tailored one, and it can be big sometimes, but it still has to be careful, especially the bigger it's going to be. And then there's some role for innovation to come out of what we seem to like to label as big tech, but sometimes they've actually got some good ideas and stand for reasonable principles, and sometimes it's too clunky and cumbersome.
Don't tell me you're a both sides-er.
I'm team nuance.
Team nuance.
Yeah, we're going to change that to my caption, I think.
That's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair. This was, by the way, not just from the Department of Justice, but with the help of a number of states' attorneys general, New Jersey, Arizona.
Well, that doesn't
California,
DC, not the usual
suspects
there, though.
It isn't. It's not the red states.
Like
in fact,
there are not that many areas where the attorneys general of New York and North Dakota agree. Besides, like, murder is bad. But
I'm not entirely sure we have a unanimous agreement there either. But I'm not necessarily... I don't look at a whole bunch of attorney generals on a brief and think, oh, well, that lends credibility to it. I tend to actually look at it and say it's Keystone Cops time. I think it actually sinks the credibility. I'd rather sort of see the DO, because it's too politicized. I mean, that's one of the things that we see, where we do see weird clusters of red AGs and blue AGs, but we tend to see them just wanting to flex their own muscles. And I'm not sure that's good policy, especially for something that's really interstate commerce.
Well, that is one of the intriguing stories about this anti-big tech movement is it has reeled in people from both sides of the aisle for differing reasons.
And then they think they can regulate, even though the exact same they want opposite things out of the regulation, which means that it's impossible.
Yeah.
But they do a lot of destruction in the process of, not coming to any possible agreement. They do a lot of damage.
Yasanovsky kind of says it is a political move. Is it a political move?
Well, everything is political. The question is whether there's anything really intellectually redeeming about it, and I have to sort of put a pin in it because I want to read it more.
Yeah.
But essentially, one of the things to ask yourself is they're looking at the current state of affairs and saying, this isn't good, we're deeming it wrong. So what is the picture they want to have painted instead? Is that a viable picture we could actually achieve? And is it one that's actually better, or does it cause more problems?
When do they start talking about remedies? Not at the beginning, at the end? Because they're not saying
specified.
They didn't specify remedy. With the Microsoft case, they wanted to break Microsoft up, as I remember.
And the Google Display Ads case, where they also asked for structural remedies.
Sell off your
structural
ad
remedies
business.
is bring me the circular saw.
Right. They're not saying whether they want structural remedies, fines, or changed behavior. They're kind of punting on that one.
I mean, one of the things is, even if they're right, where the picture we currently have is a bad one, is the pressure that they're putting on this company and the ecosystem going to give us a new picture that is better? And because two things could be true. They could be right that, Apple is wrong in some ways, but it could also be that the cure is worse than the disease. So there's a lot of analytical steps to go through here. And again, that's kind of why I'm on Team Nuance as opposed to Team Go Government or Go Big Tech, because the answers to those questions may not be the same. And then what do? How do you get the better world if this world isn't good enough and we need something better?
Brianna, whose team are you on? What team are you on?
No, I really like that answer, Team Nuance, because I read about this, I heard about this. And just before I say anything, I just want to say, I'm so glad to be the non-lawyer guest on this week.
I'm not a lawyer either.
You've got, are you not? Okay.
No, he just plays one on
my
TV.
best friends are lawyers, though.
Looks like a lawyer,
It's the
though.
singular me. I'm the lawyer. This is the burden I have to bear.
I am happy to give you. I'm happy to give you an analysis from Politico and someone who's entirely unqualified to.
But you are
any of this.
But you do understand politics better than anyone.
I do understand tech politics and how this stuff gets done. So, what I would say with this is, just being really honest, I heard about this suit and my first gut reaction, it was not nuanced. I love Apple. I use Apple products. I believe in the encryption, the privacy, of Apple, stuff like iMessage. And, you read the stuff like Android, like you read the Justice Department arguing that, Android users face quote unquote social stigma from the green bubble. And I'm like, come on, is this really what the government needs to be messing with, the encryption of my messages? Give me a break. But then, you start really reading into it and reading some of the things that they've unearthed and the allegations that they've made. And it really, I don't know if y'all have had a chance to read Kara Swisher's new book yet, Burn book. It's excellent. And one of the things she talks about is this just unmitigated arrogance that has been going on with Silicon Valley for a long time, and these men that feel like they control the world and are very low on empathy for anyone else.
Men that, by the way, Kara asked to interview her on her book tour all across the country. So there's a little question about her objectivity in this matter. I have avoided the book and don't plan to read it, but I'll let you read it for me. It's
quite good. I really enjoyed it. But my point is, I think there's real arrogance there. If you read some of the discussions that Apple had internally to reach these decision points, you can really see how it was not. The walled garden was very much a strategy, right?
There's no doubt about that. This was absolutely implemented by Apple intentionally. They've got the receipts to prove it. They've got the emails.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, in theory, this case is a big test for whether there is merit to the walled garden approach or whether there's never merit to the walled garden approach. And that's a very good point. I'm sort of afraid of, I think that's a really significant question, and I'm dubious that a massive lawsuit like this is the way to actually answer it, because it also may be a question with no answer. Yeah. But that seems to be the thing. Like, there's clearly anti-competitive effects to having a walled garden. But Apple probably can make some reasonable assertions but there's also some benefits. And I think one of the things that's going to get tested in this lawsuit is whether its claim to the benefits, how much water it holds, and then also weigh that water to see whether that's enough water to overcome the harms that they have. And I think some of the allegation, like with the green bubble thing, is the idea that no, interoperability really has much more benefits, including for the bigger picture of the overall security of the ecosystem, and that the more gatekeeping you have, the more difficult it is for the other systems to be secure. And maybe from a macro level, the gatekeeping is bad. But I mean, Apple has been telling a story, and I don't think they're just using it as a pretext, that one of the reasons they like the walled garden is because, in theory, they can control that walled garden.
Actually, the DOJ does think it's a pretext. We'll get to that.
Okay, well, that's
Which team are you on, Rob?
So, I am a longtime customer of Apple's products, although not with this laptop.
I see a Windows laptop in your lap, but okay.
Android phone in my pocket. The iPad is back at home. But also a longtime skeptic of a lot of the things it does. I think the complaint here, it makes a good case for Apple engaging in a lot of greedy, rent-seeking behavior, to use a little economic jargon, which is not really news.
It's not.
When they announced the Apple tax, the 30% take on digital transactions, even when it is, downloading a TV episode where Apple's not hosting it, they're not checking it for bugs, they're just running a credit card. That's not what you should pay 30% on. That seemed exploitative to me, 12, 13 years ago. Does that amount to Apple creating and preserving a monopoly? To argue that it has a monopoly, the DOJ argument is that there's this category of performance smartphones.
The DOJ has a huge problem here. In fact, I think there's a risk, Cathy, you're going to have to tell me if I'm off base, that a judge might simply say, they're not a monopoly. They have no more than 50 or 60% of the U.S. smartphone market.
55% of the total market. They say 70% in the performance
category. They had
to
create a new category.
But this is something you always see in antitrust cases. When two airlines want to merge, they'll say, well, the market isn't just air travel. People might take the train or drive or hitchhike or bike long distances. And so really,
I appreciate him waving at me when he said this. So.
Do you like to bike long distances?
I do like to bike long distances.
She had an impressive skeet about a cycling achievement, which seemed unimaginable to me. Which I remembered just now.
We'll get to that later.
Okay.
But and so they have to say that there's this corner of the market.
And if you look at
teenagers, it's even higher.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could also say, what is the relevant market is people with smartphones in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Right.
And so
it's artificial.
Yeah. So
is that not possible that a judge might just dismiss it and say, look, you need to have a monopoly to invoke the Sherman Antitrust Act? Microsoft had 90% of the desktop market share.
That was a much more...
There was no question.
Much more clear argument you had a monopoly there.
I think the answer is yes, but I'm not entirely sure that that's something that necessarily happens at the motion to dismiss stage. I'm not entirely positive.
Certainly Apple will file a motion to dismiss right away, right?
Probably, but this is like the biggest and the most complex litigation with a lot of strategic components to it. So
you can't dismiss it all.
It's what they want and how they want to play it and where they are. Like, I haven't looked into the venue and which courts and which judges, and all of that is going to...
Well, they picked a favorable court, and they picked a favorable venue, I'm told. I don't know anything about that, but...
Although, if favorable to whom? So if it's a DOJ favorable one of the things Apple may try to do is go to a different one to the extent that they can.
They could say that, right.
They'll kind of decide. I mean, maybe they may decide for any number of reasons they want to just plow through it and reach the merits, but there's going to be a lot. I would be more likely to expect a lot of procedural stuff, like, don't pop your popcorn yet, because there's a lot that's going to unfold, and it's going to take a long time to get there. You should be stocking up on
popcorn, though, definitely.
You can buy the popcorn, but don't pop it yet.
Rob and I both covered
popcorn futures are up on the news.
Right, yes.
Rob and I both covered the Microsoft DOJ thing, and that went on for 10 years.
Yeah.
It started in the early 90s. It came to a head in 98.
So it's funny because in multiple places, the current complaint refers back to that, talks about the whole thesis of middleware, which I think was one thing that Judge Thomas Penfield Jackson got very right in the Microsoft case. He was actually a pretty good technology analyst. He said, look, you will be able to write apps that run in the browser that'll take the place of these things you have to install in Windows. Microsoft sees that as a threat. They want to control the browser market. Well, lo and behold, how many different Google Docs do we each have open on our laptops right now?
Right. Well,
how many copies
we all have a Google Doc open. That's our show.
I have one on this laptop. It's not running right now. It's just idle on the taskbar. And so
it's running then.
The DOJ is sort of taking credit for, Apple could do this because we helped them, which is kind of a stretch.
That was wild.
And then they're saying, Apple is thinking that maybe super apps will be the next middleware, which, I'm a skeptic of that entire category because
the super app is what Elon wants to create.
Right. Like, do I want an American WeChat?
Well,
no,
interestingly,
I do not.
WeChat is available on the App Store. So this is hard. You're hard-pressed to say Apple doesn't...
It's not the real thing. It's not as much CCP surveillance as the domestic version.
But it's still WeChat.
Yes, yeah.
They chose New Jersey.
Well, I like New Jersey. New Jersey's a very nice state.
I'm also a native son of the Garden State.
As am I.
Camden is maybe not the nicest part of...
Brianna, do you have a connection to New Jersey, or are you...
No, I'm in Massachusetts.
So they picked the Third Circuit, which, according to a law professor quoted by a blog I'm reading, says that's favorable to antitrust enforcement, uncommonly friendly to monopolization cases. This is one reason, by the way, all those AGs were on there. It allowed them to cherry pick the district. And it was the New Jersey Attorney General who filed in the third district.
If Apple doesn't want to go to New Jersey,
they can move it.
Well, I don't know if they can, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't try because, they're, in theory, a Delaware corporation headquartered in California.
Right.
So the jurisdictional strings to pull to end up in New Jersey are a little bit more attenuated.
But I can assure you, Your Honor, that New Jerseyites are mostly the ones who are hurt by this Apple strategy. Am I wrong? Maybe.
If you look at this from like a 30,000-foot view, I'm not so certain about the merits of this particular case. What I do like is a Justice Department that's getting more involved in this.
I do agree with you on that.
Yeah.
And I will defend the FTC and Lena Khan and the DOJ because we have had, since Reagan, very little antitrust enforcement.
Depends when they use it. I don't think I like the complete laissez-faire that came out of a lot of the more conservative administrations. I think for the reasons that you're intimating at, there's a lot of this is probably going to be a problem for consumers, and they just sort of let it happen, let a ton of consolidation happen. But I've been very skeptical about a lot of the antitrust moves on the technology front.
Well, they've been very aggressive in the Biden administration.
Well, they've been aggressive in the Trump administration, too. I think the Biden is probably more principled about it, but I have some concerns.
The threat to sue to force the sale of TikTok started under Trump.
Yeah,
as one example.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and
Trump likes TikTok now.
Now it's changed.
Okay.
Everything's changed.
Well, there's some questions about that.
Up.
No, but to come back to this, I really do think this push is important. Just taking TikTok as an example, imagine waking up tomorrow and China had put, 20 million listening devices through everyone's houses in America. We would be freaking out. And, we're trying to do the bare steps to look at bringing in some regulation. The exact kind of laws that we applied to TV and radio just without blinking a few years ago. But these tech companies have so much power overall. What did they do? They put a push notification out to every single person's phone and are basically weaponizing that audience to try to defeat the democratic process, right? There is a lot of power here. And I think is long past time that our government started pushing back on it. So, I think we can have a conversation about how this legislation, how this lawsuit is going to go and what the remedies might be. And I'm sure we will really get into the details of monopsonies, of part manufacturing and encryption. And that's all going to be a valid conversation. I think at the core, democracy itself is weaker because our government has not done its damn job at this. And I think I really don't want that to get lost in the conversation.
No, in fact, I completely agree with you. Free market and capitalism does not work absent regulation on trust. That's what breaks the free market. You need competition to have a successful free market.
The problem with some of this, though, is what the remedy is, because two things can be true. Tech, I'll just use big tech, although I don't completely want to validate the term, but big tech does a ton of dumb stuff where I'm constantly face palming and thinking, anywhere from this is stupid to, oh my gosh, what the hell were you thinking? But what is the role for government there? Because the role for government and when does it see the problem and when does it rush in can create some new problems, including impacts on speech, where like a lot of, like particularly the Trump DOJ he didn't like the speech that was getting facilitated. And so they're using antitrust as a cudgel to essentially go after messages because, you know, big tech does have some clout in the speech department. This will be what we talk about with like the Supreme Court cases where, how Facebook moderates does have a huge effect on the ecosystem of what speech is out there in the world. But to then look at it and say, well, there's monopolistic features to this, and therefore it is appropriate for the government to overrule their independent editorial discretion, that is a big consequence. And it's a big consequence where even if you think Facebook is moderating badly, that remedy is really annihilating.
Cathy,
I do want to say,
if I can jump in for just 1 second, can I just say one thing super quickly?
Yeah.
Like, I hear you on that. I really do. And we're all on this panel today. I think we're hyper educated on this stuff and we understand that nuance. But I also think there's this, I don't know what to call it except the tech pundit merry-go-round, right? Where we look at this stuff.
Hey,
and
that's
it's like
my business, young lady. Do not mess with the merry-go-round.
But I'm talking like you pick a problem and you like find some theoretical thing that could emerge from not doing it correctly. Fair word. We could all name 100 with this today, but it consistently has paralyzed us from giving the government any kind of agency in playing a regulatory role. And you have to understand, name me an issue, whether it's porn regulation or social media or minors, what they're being exposed to, or encryption, like every single issue we get on this merry-go-round and we trick ourselves into paralysis. And I don't know if it's serving the conversation.
Well, here's the good news. We have absolutely nothing to do with the court process. And so whatever we say on this merry-go-round, we're just going to spin around. But the actual process is ongoing. And I think we all hope effective in one way or another. I don't think we need to agree on what the result needs to be. But I think we all agree that there should be a conversation about the power the tech wields in our lives, which is increasing. And the fact that is increasingly dominated by a handful of companies, I think is a reasonable cause for concern. So this conversation is an important conversation. I do, because my brain is so limited. It'd be very easy for us to go off into TikTok and other stuff. Let's focus right now. We can do that later in the show, but I want to focus right now on this specific DOJ versus Apple lawsuit, because there's more than enough here to talk about.
Lots to unpack.
Yeah. For instance, one of the things the DOJ complained about is the Apple Watch. The only thing that I have seen so far is a response from Apple is the response that, Your Honor, we've been trying to get it to work on Android for 3 years, and we haven't been able to because it's technically too difficult. Now, I'm not sure I believe Apple's response on that, but they do say, but we tried. We really did try. I want to read the first paragraph of the suit, because I think, first of all, it's written not like what I think of as a normal lawsuit, but more like a Time magazine article, you know. In 2010, a top Apple executive emailed Apple's then CEO about an ad for the new Kindle e-reader. The ad began with a woman who was using her iPhone to buy and read books on the Kindle app. She then switches to an Android smartphone and continues to read her books using the same Kindle app. The executive wrote to Steve Jobs, one, quote, message that can't be missed is that it is easy to switch from iPhone to Android. Not fun to watch, end quote. Jobs was clear in his response. Apple would force developers to use its payment system to lock in both developers and users on its platform. Now, they have the email, right? So they know that this actually exchange happened many, many years, 14 years ago. But they have, I'm sure, many more emails from previous lawsuits versus Epic and others. They have a lot, and Samsung and Google, they have a lot of evidentiary documents. I'm sure one of the negatives of this always for Apple is that there will be even more discovery.
Well, my favorite quote in it is not something that they had to go through discovery to get. It's when Tim Cook was asked, somebody said, when I text my mother, she gets grainy videos and whatnot because Apple only chose to support SMS for iPhone to Android messaging. Cook's response was, buy your mom an iPhone.
Yeah, which is bad.
Incredibly stupid. Like right then, I can imagine Apple's lawyers were throwing up in their mouths.
And actually, I think Apple may not be to blame for this because Apple's forced to use SMS and MMS, and these are the standards for those crappy systems.
RCS has been around, not just the deluxe
and Apple's
Google
moving,
version.
they say, to RCS this year.
So this is an interesting case because I always thought Apple had no justification for doing what they did. If you're saying privacy is a fundamental human right, then you can't leave SMS. This important channel of communication totally unencrypted in the clear because we don't want to do RCS. When Google had been pleading publicly, Apple, get the message, hashtag, and none of the arguments for not doing it made sense. They would say, we can't do RCS because it's not encrypted end-to-end.
Right.
Why does Apple Mail exist? Why does iCloud Mail exist? Because that's not encrypted end-to-end. So if nothing but E-to-E encryption will do, then you have to shut down your mail service and let people choose a third-party mail client.
We mocked
so
that.
Distasteful.
We mocked that Google campaign for a long time because, of course, users don't care. And we thought, oh, they're trying to get users to complain to Apple. Now, in hindsight, I'm thinking maybe the real point of that message was the government and giving them
perhaps
some fodder.
A government organization based in Brussels.
Or the EU.
The EU said you must have interoperability, and then hell froze over, and Apple said, we'll do this thing, which the settlement acknowledges, which in some ways undercuts the DOJ's case.
But it also makes it in the sense that if with absent governmental pressure, Apple's not going to do the best thing for its customers. So we need to pursue.
And now there's this weird precedent that because of all the stuff that's happened in the EU, these sweeping giant regulatory packages, Apple has already created the EU spec version of iOS where you can do things like have other app stores. You can, app publishers can link out to their own payment systems. They can tell you that you can pay elsewhere and the developer doesn't have to fork over 15 to 30%. We in the US don't get that.
Right.
But perhaps Apple will decide, we'll offer you some of these things. We'll bring over some of that since we already did the work.
There's another problem that I think comes, again, down to these teams. But Apple users don't choose the iPhone because they have to. I use an iPhone because I want to.
I don't use an iPhone because I don't want to.
And you have the choice.
It was that stupid Lightning port, and then I'm still bitter about it.
You have the choice.
And the no headphone jack thing.
So you guys are using Windows and Android, but just because you have a choice.
Well, there is the general thing of, do we have adequate choices, or are too many things being squeezed out? And the answer may be yes. But yeah, I never really liked the Apple my way or the highway. This is how we approach using computing.
A choice.
And it was nice that I did. I sort of do feel like my choices are being constrained. I don't really feel like I've got adequate choices, but yes, technically there is at least one other option, maybe two other options. So, but you know, what do you want from your computing? Because now we actually kind of want and even need more than I think we necessarily saw before. We need the device, we need the operating system, but we also do need, this is not going to be the right word, some form of babysitting. Like, who's going to do my cybersecurity? Like, you know, I don't have the time or I don't want to admit to the lack of sophistication, but I'm not, you know, this is not my day job. So,
but that's Apple's strong argument is, look, we're doing all of this to make a ecosystem that is safe, secure, and private for our users.
The counter argument is, say, offer all that. So people can go to any payment provider, any app platform, but give the consumer a reason to choose yours. You can't just forestall the choice. And I think that's probably the crux of the case, that they're forestalling the choice as opposed to actually competing, because their delivery of these features would actually be better than anybody else's. Because it also doesn't give anybody else a chance to be better than Apple would be.
Is that the case, though? I mean, I think you can make the case that Google has fumbled Android. Samsung has done a pretty credible job with their... You're using a Google phone.
I'm using a Google phone.
I have a Google Pixel phone.
You also Pixel. I have a Pixel.
Well, not
but
just
Samsung's offering many of the same ecosystem protections that Apple offers.
Well, some of that is you're now on an entirely different device ecosystem, so the choice is much bigger. But I'm thinking for some of this of like, make a lot of what Apple is delivering more a la carte. Because right now I think there's a big tying and bundling argument wrapped up in it, where once you are in the Apple ecosystem, it's Apple all the way.
Tying and bundling is what got Microsoft in trouble.
Yeah,
that was the big problem for Microsoft.
And that, I mean, this is tricky in the tech space where everything is evolving and moving so fast. But I think the idea is like, okay, you've got your device, you've got your operating system, you've got your app store, you've got the filtering you're doing on the app store, you've got payments, and the idea that it all has to be one stop with Apple, as opposed to could you bifurcate and split off some of these features where other people can just compete, like for the payment processor.
Open it up.
Could another payment, could you use another payment processor? Right. Could you use another app store?
Why is it I can only use Apple Pay with my NFC on my phone?
Every single feature that an Apple device
The suit makes a good argument
offers.
that if you had App Store competition, you could have one that was optimized for parents. So we're only going to accept apps that, you
can have more restrictive,
features.
more
Right,
restrictive,
yeah.
more private.
And it points
more
out that
secure.
Apple has allowed enterprises, companies, whatever. If you're in an enterprise context, then you have these other options that American consumers don't get.
If I could just jump in, and something I would add to that is I don't think it's unreasonable now. Like the smartphone market is very mature, and every single year it seems like Apple is trying to come out with new features and things like that. I don't see any reason in the world why they can't form a standards committee with, Android about what a truly secure, like interoperable, like text message system would be that you can opt into or just choose not to participate in. Like, do this for all of these services. It seems to me that they've got the resources to do that and to like placate the antitrust people. It just seems like it's good for competition. It would be good for like an innovation feature. It's like data portability, something I thought a lot of tech people believed in. There's just no reason not to do this unless you are trying to lock people in.
I think that's a strong argument. I don't know if it's a legal argument, but that from the point of view of a consumer, having a choice, you may still make the Apple choice, but having a choice is always going to be better. Having an open ecosystem, being able to use the NFC on your iPhone for whatever payment system you feel like using is good for consumers. And Apple can make, that's an opportunity for Apple to make the case, but ours is safer, but you can use whatever you want.
I mean, I think some of Apple's argument, and maybe it's pretextual, but there could actually be something to it, so we don't want to just run roughshod over it, is that they're going to argue that the closed ecosystem makes it a safer ecosystem because nothing ends up in it that isn't supposed to be in it because they're doing the vetting and the control and stuff.
If only that were true.
But
it's not.
There's the inconvenient fact that there is such a thing as Mac OS, where you are not handcuffed to a single app store. Yeah. I remember seeing Apple has made this argument when they were trying to stop the EU from mandating a choice of app stores. If you make us do this, here are all the whole parade of horribles that can ensue. And of course, they never mention the cut they take of App Store transactions. And they never mention the fact that they have this entire other computing platform, another category of general purpose devices where you can actually download apps from somebody's site. And it's quite often better for the developer that you do that, since they get much more of a cut of what you're paying them. And
by the way, Android also offers that capability.
They try to make it difficult.
They make it difficult, but they offer it. Apple's the only place where they have absolute control. You cannot get a browser that is not based on WebKit.
And Apple's, when you're the choke point, you will also see oppressive governments in the rest of the world lean on you to exercise that control. So the choice of VPN apps you have in the People's Republic of China, it's apparently not so great. When Apple, I guess, was still doing business in Russia, there were various apps that were getting. There was this strategic voting app, I think Alexei Navalny's people were trying to get people to use.
And that Navalny app is banned in Russia on the App Store.
But I think both Apple and Google took it down, but Google put it back up sooner. It was not a great episode for either one, but in one of those cases, it was not the only way to get the app.
Right. On Android. On Apple, it was the only way. This is... We're going to, by the way, we'll wrap this up pretty quick because we have a whole show dedicated to the Macintosh coming up Tuesday, in which this debate will rage for the whole show. But I do have to quote Cory Doctorow. We asked Cory to be on the show today. He couldn't. He's on an airplane. But he writes about it on his blog at pluralistic.net. And he says, and I have to laugh when I read it, the foundational tenet of the cult of Mac is that buying products from a $3 trillion company makes you a member of an oppressed ethnic minority. And therefore, every criticism of that corporation is an ethnic slur. Call it Apple exceptionalism, the idea that Apple alone among the big tech firms is virtuous and therefore its conduct should be interpreted through that lens of virtue. He makes the point, as you just did, of China and Russia, that Apple is in fact a corporation following its best corporate interests and the interests of its
Corporations
stakeholders.
are not your friends.
They are not your friends. It is. If it's at all true, it's a marketing cloud that Apple's woven quite well around itself. And he points out Apple did go to the mattresses to fight the FBI when they tried to put a backdoor in their encryption. That Apple, with that one click of the finger with the application tracking permission dialogue, ATT completely decimated Facebook's ability to spy on you.
Oh, so sad.
To the benefit of Apple, we should point out, which is a first party, and Bruce Schneier, this is again Cory Doctorow, has a name for this practice, feudal security. That's when you, and this would be what you were talking about, Cathy, when you cede control over your device to a big tech warlord whose walled garden becomes a fortress that defends you against external threats. And Cory points out that external threats, yes, internal threats, not so much. And anyway, Cory, as always, is very adept with his writing and makes a very strong case. Clearly, he is of the more regulation, less Apple group. We're going to have three parties. The Nuance Party is definitely now one of the groups. The pro-regulation group, and then the Cult of Mac group. We can add more if you need it.
I'm not sure that's an equivalent taxonomy, but okay.
I think Cory Doctorow, like, I respect him. I love his work. I think his analysis of Apple is historically driven by real animosity for the company. I do think he undervalues, I think he could use some team nuance, because I do think he undervalues the benefits of vertical integration for normal people that are not going to like switch between 5 different VPNs to figure out which one works for them. I think there are benefits that he consistently discounts in his analysis.
I agree. He quotes the DOJ's pleading. This is, I think, to the point. This is from the Department of Justice. Apple wraps itself in a cloak of privacy, security, and consumer preferences to justify its anti-competitive conduct. Indeed, it spends millions on marketing and branding to promote the self-serving premise, again, this is the Department of Justice, that only Apple can safeguard consumers' privacy and security interests. Apple selectively compromises privacy and security interests when doing so is in Apple's own financial interest, such as degrading the security of text messages, offering governments and certain companies the chance to access more private and secure versions of app stores, or accepting billions of dollars each year for choosing Google as its default search engine when more private options are available. In the end, to me, this is the biggest indictment of the whole 88 pages. I've miscounted. In the end, Apple deploys privacy and security justifications as an elastic shield that can stretch or contract to serve Apple's financial and business interests.
That's good writing, but is that actually a crime?
It may not be a crime, but it is true. Let's say that, right? I think we know that that's the case. But is it a crime is a good question. Is it a crime, Cathy?
We'll see.
Nuance.
Team Nuance on the game. It's really complicated. Our friend Jason Snell wrote his opinion in his Six Colors blog, his first reaction. And his biggest initial complaint is that how can you call a 60% share of a market a monopoly? And I think that that's going to be a problem, too. I think, do they not have to prove monopoly in order to make this case?
I mean, that's one of the things that's been kicked around in a lot of the recent, from Trump into Biden's administration, about market definition is like a big thing that a crux of a lot of this hinges on. And it's not a precise science. And it's an art form that seems to change to a lot of political whims, which is also not great. So we kind of don't really have great tools because one of the fundamental things that would make the tool work is wishy-washy. And I think there's probably things we could probably do to make it less wishy-washy, but I don't know if you can completely eradicate all of that because sometimes markets are really, it's a cross-sectional thing. And especially in these new technologies where everything moves so fast, the market you thought you had today is not necessarily the market that you have tomorrow. Like, how much power did Twitter and Facebook have prior to Blue Sky and Mastodon? Like, in a year, all of a sudden, there was an awful lot of market dilution and you got a lot more competition. And so that was quick. And antitrust is slow.
You use the word monopsony, and this is something Lena Khan at the FTC has talked about. Senator Warren from your state, Massachusetts, Brianna has talked
Commonwealth, not a state.
The Commonwealth. Pardon me. Let's get that right. Apple is a monopsony. I don't think the DOJ addresses that particularly.
I haven't looked for it.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, they haven't.
But sometimes you can have a company that the company itself is fine, but a thing they're doing is not fine.
Right.
And sometimes the company inherently is so unfine that, like, that's why you wouldn't want a merger or something like that.
Well, one of the things, and a lot of people brought this up as a kind of a howler in the DOJ document, is that they said, and now Apple is going to use its market power to dominate the auto industry using CarPlay, which made a lot of us go, what? But Neil,
that thought, was GM not insane when they said we're not going to do CarPlay or Android Auto? But it's GM, so we could.
Actually, didn't GM back down, though? I think GM backed down and said, yeah,
so.
we might.
They backed down and saying we're not going to sell our customers' data to insurance companies.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I mean,
unbelievable.
It's a multi-controversy week in any of this space for
really
any
is.
particular player. It's hard to keep track of, like, you're the good guy in this one, you're the bad guy in that one, you're, the victim in this one. It's just...
Nilay Patel in The Verge, and this is, again, from Jason's article, he points out, said that this implies perhaps that Apple is going to pull a Google on car manufacturers and say, you can't use CarPlay unless you let us take over the entire auto interface, which would be a grab for power. I don't know how
the Apple car will live on that way.
Yeah, I don't know how effective it would be. I think companies like GM, there will be other companies that would say, well, no, that's too lucrative for us to control that, or too important. Or
I think what we're seeing is that the car manufacturers want to actually use the leverage in the fact that people still need cars to then become tech players themselves, where they want to actually be able to compete full-throatedly with Google and Apple, et cetera. Because essentially now we've realized the car is the computer on wheels. So they want to be tech companies more than they may necessarily want to be auto companies.
Right.
The same way airlines are now credit card companies.
Yeah, everybody's a tech company nowadays, yeah.
And, on the one hand, that should say, ooh, more players equals better stuff. But everybody is really trying to build, they're land grabbing. So they're all trying to build the biggest fences that they possibly can. It's kind of interesting that Apple is taking the first hit. But I might actually be more worried about some of the stuff that's happening on the sidelines with other things about, like, are the car manufacturers doing things where they get maybe an undue amount of influence over what everybody else is competing. You want to bundle something in a car? Well, you're bundling it to their specification. Yeah,
that's the ultimate.
I mean, it's
you're on four wheels. You can't use anything else.
Yeah, and we didn't really have this problem, I guess, in the car industry where you could have third-party radios and third-party sunroofs and stuff like that, and the ability to have third-party features and services in a car. Is that under threat right now? And is it good, bad, or otherwise if it's under threat?
What kind of third-party gear have you put in that Porsche yours lately?
I'm a Porsche purist, so I only do Porsche stuff. Okay. But it's a real problem, the lock-in. I mean, for the Porsche 718 Cayman, for that particular model, you can't use an Android phone in it just because they have a contract with Apple, and you're completely locked out. Have to buy the, it comes at very high cost because you've got to spend $1,567 to add the Porsche version of that, just have navigation in your $100,000 car.
Oh, that's ridiculous. So I drive a BMW, which is running on Android Auto. You use the Android operating system, but I can run CarPlay or Android Auto on top of it. But when I run CarPlay on top of it, I really end up in the BMW interface. You could live in the CarPlay interface, but a lot of stuff doesn't work right.
That's right.
And so I think that car manufacturers are very aware of Apple and would be very reluctant to give over much power to Apple in this.
I think that's fair. Yeah, but something I'm really worried about with all of this is, it's an election year, and I see the Biden administration picking some big fights. I personally agree with them. The TikTok ban now kind of going after Apple, but this is going to be a really close election. It's really interesting to see Congress picking this fight when the regulatory consequences of the fights they're picking are going to be salient election issues and having done nothing back when no one would have noticed or cared. It's very interesting because I could see a lot of this swinging the election.
Oh, that's interesting. Really?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, the TikTok ban, 100%.
Oh,
but swinging it for whom?
We're gonna need Gen Z to win this thing.
It's Democrat suicide to go antagonize the youth vote. I don't understand why.
Their response would be to not vote. Not to vote for the other guy.
They certainly.
They might vote for the other guy.
Well,
he was the guy who wanted to ban TikTok in the first place.
Yeah, but now he's their friend. But I don't. But they're not going to see. They're not going to see any sort of agency that Democrats are going to be speaking for them. They're going to see the Democrats are.
It's a huge mistake.
It's a huge mistake.
Let's take a break. We can move on from the Apple thing. We should address this TikTok thing because it's a very interesting and new. I think talk about team nuance. It's a nuanced conversation.
I'm not entirely 100%. Sure, actually, it is. I mean, I'll always bring nuance, but I think I don't think the things.
Well, hold on. Right. Hold the thought.
Okay, hold the thought.
I think we'll see. I think there's some nuance here, but we'll see. Okay. Our show today brought to you by the way, great to have all three of you here. Cathy Gellis obviously knows whereof she speaks. We've had her on many times. She's an attorney, writes for Tech Dirt. And is admitted to the bar for the Supreme Court. We are going to talk about Murthy versus Missouri in a little bit, a case both of you have a stake in. That's Rob Pegoraro, who is also more than welcome on our microphone, although it's only your second time, but that was just because you live in D.C., but I guess we could use Zoom to talk to you. It's great to have you in here, Rob. And, of course, Brianna Wu from Rebellion Pack, speedrunner, Princess Peach. You still number 2?
I'm still number 2, but there's a new Princess Peach game out. It's called Princess Peach Showtime, and I am obsessed with it and already working to set the world record.
Do you ever do Princess Peach cosplay?
No. That's not my look, Leo.
Okay, just checking. I don't know. I thought maybe. I don't know. Well, I don't know. I don't know how it works.
I'm too brunette to wear pink. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, that might be a show title. Our show today brought to you by Thinks Canary. I got a canary in the other room. It is the coolest way to know if there's somebody inside your network. We all have, and we all think, we're impervious. Great defenses on the perimeter, right? To keep people out of our network. But what happens when they get inside? And they do. Sometimes it's a hacker. Sometimes it's just a malicious insider. But if there's somebody roaming around your network, do you have any way of knowing? You would if you had a Thinks Canary. It's a honeypot, but not a hard-to-implement honeypot. A honeypot that can be deployed in minutes so that if someone is accessing your system, is inside your network, they are going to irresistibly be drawn to this. And as soon as they open that file or attack that device, you're going to immediately get an alert that matters. No false alerts, just alerts that matter so you can act upon it. You can use your Thinks Canary to set lure files, PDFs, XLS files, doc files that are spread out around your system. Anytime anybody tries to open it, you get an alert. I'm not saying I do, have Excel files titled payroll information just lying around on our network. Somebody tries to open that, I know, I'll find out, and I can start to act upon that. Similarly, you can make your Thinks Canary look like almost anything. Mine looks like a Synology NAS. It's got the Synology MAC address. It's got the DSM login. It is indistinguishable from the real thing with one exception. When somebody tries to log into it, I get an alert. I get the notification. You can make it a SCADA device, a Linux server, a Windows server. You can make it an SSH server, an IIS server. You can choose almost anything for your Things Canary device. You register it with your hosted console for monitoring and notifications, and the notifications can come in any way you please. Syslog, of course, you can use the console. You can get email. You can get a text message. It supports webhooks. It supports Slack. You know, whatever you prefer, you will be notified. But again, no false positives, just the alerts that matter. When attackers breach your network or malicious insiders start to wander around where they shouldn't be, you will know. The Things Canary is a device every network should have. Actually, some big banks might have hundreds of canaries spread out. Smaller operation like ours, maybe about 5. I'll give you a price example for us. Canary.tools/twit. You go there, $7,500 a year. You get 5 Things Canaries. With that, your own hosted console, all the upgrades, all the support, all the maintenance for that year. If you use the code TWIT in the How Did You Hear About Us box, 10% off that, and not just for the first year, but forever. And here's really, this will settle it, right? Now you're thinking, I hope you're thinking, this would be a good thing to have. They have a 2-month money-back guarantee for a full refund. 60 days to decide. Things Canary. Go to canary.tools/twit. I have to point out that during all the years we've talked about Things Canaries, I think it's almost 10 now, the refund guarantee has never been claimed. Everybody who gets a Canary says, yes, I need this thing. I want this thing. This is doing the job. I've got to have it. Visit canary.tools/twit. The offer code TWIT in the How Did You Hear About Us box for a big savings. Thank you, Things, for a great product that has protected us in the past. All right, let's talk TikTok. Here's the one point of concern. First of all, there seems to be now, it was passed out of the committee into the House. The House passed it. It is now sitting on Chuck Schumer's desk. He has refused to bring it up in the Senate. It's up to him. I'm not sure why. The Senate has received briefings from the intelligence community saying something scary. And I think this is one of the reasons the House suddenly passed this. And that President Biden, by the way, has promised to sign it if the Senate will get it through. In fact, there are some members of Congress who are saying, well, Maria Cantwell, the chair of the Commerce Committee, said the next steps might be something more public, a hearing in a joint way, or perhaps to let the intelligence report go public. People need to hear this. What could it say that would make these members of Congress so adamant about banning TikTok? By the way, a ban or a sale, but the Chinese government has been pretty clear they're not going to allow a sale of TikTok. So yeah, it would effectively ban it in the United States.
Well, we'll see if they blink if we do that. China says a lot of stuff, and then, the diplomatic process kicks in. But look, let's be really clear. It's not like ByteDance has not been caught spying on people already. Leo, you're a journalist. ByteDance got caught basically surveilling journalists on the platform to try to figure out who their employees were leaking data to. They promised to do better, and it's very unclear that they have. So I have zero doubt that they are going to abuse this massive amount of information that they've had. And let's also be clear, like TikTok has had 4 years to clean up their mess since the Trump years, and they've fallen into scandal after scandal after scandal after scandal. They're not serious about this, and we need to take them at their word with that. So there's a very long history in this country of making sure that foreign powers do not have control over our information space. Rupert Murdoch was forced to become an American citizen before he could complete one of his major television station deals.
Are we sure that was such a good idea?
You know what? I actually do, because something Rupert Murdoch has done is he's always really treasured a good relationship with whoever is president of the United States, particularly when they are Republicans. And I think I have, as a Democrat, a lot of criticisms of Fox News, but I don't think they're inherently trying to push the agenda of the CCP or Russia. So these are important, like, precedents in law. And I don't know why the hell big tech just gets a pass on any of this.
Yeah, but none of this solves this problem. I mean, one of the things I came up with, okay, so let's say you force the sale of TikTok. Then a whole bunch of people came out of the woodwork saying, well, we can fund the purchase of it. They're not people I want to have my data anyway. Meanwhile, all the American companies are completely free to collect whatever and then just sell it to China because there's no law banning that. Like there is let's say there's a legitimate problem of apps being able to slurp a lot of data and sending that data to people who really shouldn't have it. That is a significant policy problem. But forcing the sale doesn't solve that policy problem, and it runs headlong into, and I think facially, and I think this is also why a lot of the politicians are going along with it, it impinges on speech, because right now that is a platform that seems to induce and exchange a certain type of information that isn't necessarily hospitably found on other platforms, and that will go away, and that is a problem. So you end up inflicting that problem of the huge hit to speech and the ability of people to express themselves and consume other people's expression, and you still haven't solved the keeping data out of the hands of people who really shouldn't have it. So you're not solving the problem, you're just creating a new one. And on that front, it's garbage and unredeemable garbage. And thank goodness, like, there's a little bit more sanity on the Senate side to sort of realize, hang on a second, this is not fit for purpose in terms of what we're doing. And it's not like it's not like anybody in the House really engaged Team Nuance to sort of notice that this is actually not a solution to the problem that we're addressing. And there's no recognition that it won't, or acknowledgement, or even some sense of loss in terms of what problem it would actually induce.
Is it cynical of me to say that the House passed it because they don't care if it hurts Biden's candidacy, that the Senate, which is controlled by Democrats, is a little bit more concerned? Is purely cynical on their part?
It's not cynical. It's not cynical, but I do have to take contention.
It does seem like a performative law if they're not willing to pass comprehensive privacy.
I don't think it is a performative law. I don't think I have to take contention with that. I just don't agree with you. I think this does a lot. It sets a precedent. And again, we're on the tech pundit merry-go-round where if it doesn't solve everything, we can't start to pick off one part of the problem. That's not how the political process works.
But I'm not on
it's
the
just
tech
hold
pundit.
on. I let you finish your point. That's not how the political process works. You start with something, you start like working in new jurisprudence with it. So here we've got something that's very clear. It is very easy to find bipartisan consensus on something that's a national security issue, right? So if we can start doing this, it is a very big deal if the CCP can directly go and say, we want this algorithm, we want this story, we want to suppress this about the Uyghurs, something we have absolute information that they're doing. There's objective information. It proves that they are doing that. And your argument about speech being suppressed, I don't think this is true. This exact same format of speech is available on YouTube Shorts, Facebook Reels, and Instagram Reels. In fact, most TikTok creators take their content and then go recycle it on the other platforms.
Yeah, my son Henry, and I have to say I'm a little bit biased in this, does exactly that. You're right, Brianna, but he has far more followers, and I think it's far more effective for him on TikTok than it is on Instagram or YouTube, although he does. Actually, he started on TikTok, became famous on TikTok, and then was able to spread that to Instagram and YouTube. I don't think it would have worked the same way. And I have to say, it's to a great deal due to TikTok's algorithm. For some reason, maybe the Chinese government liked him, I don't know, picking up his videos and promoting them. And that made that he went from 30,000 followers to 2.5 million in a matter of months. It's created a business for him. So to some degree, I have a dog in this hunt. Are you concerned at all, Brianna, about the creators who use TikTok? You think they'll just move to Instagram?
I think there will be a market for them to take this exact product somewhere else. I think someone else can come into this. There is a secret sauce with the way you edit TikTok videos that is unique to that. It will take time to do it. Facebook has tried to capture this, but I really have to push back.
By the way, by stealing basically the format, right? All of these are copycats of TikTok.
But it was copying Vine, right? The secret sauce of TikTok, and my job is
Vine was 8 seconds.
My job is to work with people that are on TikTok and other platforms and work to get political messages out in a very strategic way. Okay, I have really strong opinions about these tools. I can see how someone could have some really malicious motivations and go in and do the exact same thing I'm doing with a bunch of money from someone that was it's just so manipulatable. I think if you don't work in this field, you don't understand it.
Yeah.
The point I want to interject is I'm not a tech pundit on the merit ground. I'm a legal advocate, and my job is to basically say that violating the First Amendment is never a viable first step in solving any policy problem. That cannot be the first thing that's on the table. Let's have a discussion about what the privacy problems are with TikTok and with absolutely everything else that's running on our technology devices. That's the conversation we should be having. That's something we need a nuanced and targeted policy remedy for. But this is just going to squelch the speech, and I don't regard that as an incidental consequence, not just because of Leo's son, but that's just one of the many
examples.
It's
a very good example of the millions of people who make their living on TikTok.
And I mean, the politics, I don't care about the politics. Violating the First Amendment is not a legitimate first step in solving any particular policy problem. It is not minor, and my job in this world is to make sure we don't do it.
Can you do comprehensive privacy laws that don't violate?
I think we got to be really careful, and nobody seems to be in the mood to actually be careful, but I'm going to be an optimist and say yes. I mean, one of the things that the First Amendment requires is narrow tailoring. So it's not to say that it's a permanent obstruction to anything, but you better be really damn careful about where you're making cuts. You can probably do some things that don't implicate the First Amendment. And then if you did actually bump upon it, you might be able to be really, really, really careful about how you're excising the problems. But nobody's being careful right now. And everybody's just blundering in as if there is no massive First Amendment problem with what they are trying to talk about. A TikTok ban is a ban on TikTok expression. And that's not the problem. That's allegedly not the problem they're trying to solve. But yes, I actually probably think that for some of the reps,
three arguments
they're
I see. I think only one of them really holds up. The privacy issue, I don't think that is realistic at all. There is a huge business of data brokers collecting data from every other app. Mm-hmm. Do you think those data brokers will turn down money if the credit card happens to be from some office in Beijing or Shanghai? No, they will not. So that problem exists no matter what. You could eliminate TikTok from the market. Brokers. And this same house that rushed to ban TikTok hasn't done a damn thing about that. Right. I've been writing about
By the way, I think that's because the intelligence agencies buy that data and they want that data, and so they're telling Congress.
Senator Wyden is trying to stop that.
Yeah. They're saying to Congress, you wouldn't really don't want to ban those.
If somebody is talking about TikTok and is not talking about meaningful privacy legislation, which we do not have at the federal level, they're not serious.
I agree.
So is literally my job to do this stuff, Rob. And by the way, I don't like being contentious. Y'all all seem awesome.
No, be contentious.
I don't like disagreeing with you.
No. This is important, and it doesn't mean you don't like us. It just means you're fighting. Sure. That's good.
I have a different point of view. Rob, I think you imagine when you're thinking of data with these platforms, I think you're imagining an old school Excel spreadsheet, like where you just give them a ton of data and let them surf through it. I can tell you, as someone who has worked at this at a hyper micro level with every single platform that's out there, it does not work that way. You're going to a single data broker, and then they have a long conversation if you're asking to innovate or do anything different, because remember, most of what they want to do is just sell you ads with their own targeting. It gets so tricky because they've got their policies and they don't want to give up any access to their internal database. This is absolutely my experience. So I think if you're imagining like them just going to quote unquote a data broker and getting all this information and passing it to the CCP, I am telling you, it does not work that way in practice, and someone would go to jail. Like they would get fired. They couldn't get all that data out. You've got to actually have the credentials and work with the data scientists to get micro-targeted data.
I'm sure there are cutoffs in the United States working for the CCP who could do all of that and pass that information along to CCP. It doesn't have to be a Chinese credit card.
It would be an export ultimately, and it would be trackable, and it does matter.
No, it wouldn't. Brianna, you could be a Chinese operative for all we know, buying the same information and then passing it along to the Chinese Communist Party. If you can get that information, there's nothing to stop it from being sent to somebody in Beijing. There's literally nothing to stop that.
I have no reassurance in an American citizen slurping data.
Well, we know. Look, Mark Zuckerberg's slurping it all.
Yeah.
We know that. I guess the Congress is saying, well, it's better if Mark does it than if Xi Jinping does it.
What Congress has said so far is the only privacy problem we think actually exists is TikTok, and nothing else is actually worth even getting a bill out of committee.
But Brianna, you're making a case not so much as partly it's privacy, but you're also making the case that it could be used to propagandize America.
Well, so that's the second thing I look at.
There are multiple things. Go ahead. Yeah.
The Chinese are already doing that. The Washington Post had a good story not too long ago pointing out that because content moderation is the low-order bit at the former Twitter, they're going to town there and
they have free reign on Twitter.
Right, and they've been trying that on Facebook and for years as well. So banning TikTok, or in this case, realistically, banning commercial transactions, what the government can do. Like Huawei is a non-entity in the U.S. because it's on the entity list. And so they can legally do. I mean, look, this is. But that doesn't mean the government cannot tell me, like, I cannot go to this site. I'm not allowed to read stuff from this place.
Well, what they would effectively do is ban it from the App Store, probably, right? Right.
Which, of course,
they can do that.
If you could sideload TikTok because of what the DOJ is doing.
I'm on the web right now.
Yeah, all right. Now I'm on Team DOJ because they're going to make sure that we can still get our TikTok because we just have to slurp it from some offshore app store.
So to wrap up, there is the argument that the Chinese government doesn't let any American social media apps operate there.
Including TikTok, by the way.
Right. That's an export-only thing. We don't have to invite them there, but the other problem is this is the United States. And
we are not China.
China.
But there is a long-standing tradition in the United States to keep foreign governments from influencing our government, and that's a long-standing tradition. So I don't, in fact, there's a very good piece in the Atlantic. I know you've seen this, Brianna, from Zephyr Teachout. Critics of the TikTok bill are missing the point. America has a long history of shielding infrastructure and communications platforms from foreign control.
Yeah, but she filed an amicus brief in the Murthy case, I believe, which basically argued that our government should be able to control what.
She did.
What people? Yeah, I think
Zephyr.
It was a brief. I'm blanking on it because it's been a month.
She's a professor at Fordham Law School.
There is a brief with her and Wu and I think Lessig, and it's kind of on team state censor, and I don't really understand exactly how you get there. So
we should point out Teachout's book is called "Break 'Em Up: Recovering Our Freedom from Big Ag, Big Tech, and Big Money."
Sure.
So
it's like getting so committed to wanting to burn down the big that you don't sort of recognize how bad the forest fire is.
Now, hold on. Critiquing an article, someone's point in an article because you don't like something they've written or said someone else is not getting directly at their point. So let's take what was actually written in this article on their merits, okay? And the fact is, we have a lot of laws in this country that have been deemed constitutional that's like control foreign entities having control of mass media in the United States. And coming back to an earlier point you made about free speech, look, just for the sake of argument, let's assume you're correct and this is a free speech argument. I don't think it is, and I think the criteria, if this does go to court, how that's going to be decided is like what the principles are or what they're using to limit this or force the sale. But let's just, for the sake of argument, assume that you're right. So the Senate will pass this. Biden will sign it. It will go through jurisprudence. The Supreme Court will rule it down and strike it down, and you'll win. But ultimately, you're positing something, and it is your opinion. It has not been ruled that. It is just a very specific way to look at this that I really think there's a wider legal argument that is not on your side.
In fact, Teachout says that the First Amendment constitutional claims of the First Amendment on behalf of foreign governments are extremely weak. And she quotes a judgment from Brett Kavanaugh, when he was a judge in 2011 on a federal court, writing that the country has a compelling interest in limiting the participation of foreign citizens in such activities, quote, thereby preventing foreign influence over the U.S. political process. So there probably is precedent.
I'm not sure that's the framing of what exactly the ban would do, because this would be a ban that is inherently impinging on American citizens.
It's American citizens using TikTok.
Yeah.
So you're banning their platform, but you're also secondarily banning them.
Yeah.
And by the way, Brianna, I know you say they can move to Instagram, but this is my son's page on TikTok, which is, much more vital and active, has download views. This is his same page, same content on Instagram. I think even he would say it is not nearly as compelling on Instagram. It's not, for him, it wouldn't be a equivalent replacement. He has wisely, because he listens to his pop, been trying to move to YouTube and Insta for some time now because of my concerns over TikTok. He doesn't want to be a one-platform guy either, but there are plenty of other people who are solely platformed on TikTok.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong.
What do you say to them, Brianna? Do you say, sorry, but it's a Chinese company, so get off?
I think my hope would be that saner heads would win and that there would be a forced divestment and that these companies are ultimately about like making money, and I don't think it would get to that point. But I haven't particularly enjoyed Twitter since Elon bought it. Like, these platforms don't go forever. Changes happen, and the reality is, if he's a content creator, whatever he's on is going to change. So he can learn that lesson now or learn it later.
But the reason why I care about the First Amendment arguments is because, totally agree, like, these platforms don't live forever, and they should be able to die because they deserve to die. And therefore, we get something better alongside. I care about the legal ecosystem that is going to enable something new and better to come. And I am afraid of, I don't consider it benign to say that let's pass this law and let the courts deal with it as something that is benign. That is something really chilling to the ecosystem to get something. Look, let's get everybody off of TikTok. Great. I don't have any problem with having the conversation about should you be there or not. But we need to get a substitute. And I really care about running roughshod over major legal doctrines that are going to allow us to be able to get the better thing. And that's going to scorch the earth, at least for a while. So we're not going to get the we're not going to get the TikTok alternatives if this is the approach to getting rid of TikTok itself. I think it's just, it's a very salting the earth, where even if all the arguments for why this company needs to go away, even if I agreed with about the foreign control, which I don't, but let's say I do, this is just going to be so devastating to the ecosystem to even getting something domestic out of it.
I think I hear what you're saying, I respect it, but I think there is, from my point of view, the person that is ignoring jurisprudence and the laws and the precedent here is you. Because we do have a very, very, very long history of applying these laws to radio, to television, to newspapers.
Very different things doctrinally.
It doesn't seem like that precedent is important to you. I think this is a really key part. It is normal for a country to want to have control over its information ecosystem. How can we have a democracy if hostile foreign powers are the ones that decide if we get to see a story or not? That's a free speech issue.
But doctrinally, the ability for the government to say and exert more control over the radio, it can exert control over spectrum because spectrum is scarce. That is the way that the First Amendment bar to that sort of meddling is worked around. They don't get to say with newspapers. The newspaper is a much stronger thing, and in any case where a decision may have gone the other way, I think it's really aberrant and an outlier. And what's coming out of, I'm going to be a little bit optimistic about what's coming out of the Supreme Court, but I think the Supreme Court is recognizing that the model for the internet is the newspaper model, and the newspaper model has a much stronger First Amendment doctrine where the exceptions that you're referring to would not apply to TikTok and that form of ownership. I do think the First Amendment stands as a bar, and the precedent by and large supports that Congress does not get to do what it is trying to do right now.
I hear you, respect you. I just, I don't agree.
No, that's fair. No, that's fair. That's why we have this conversation. If you all agreed, it would be kind of pointless. I think it's important to get both points of view out of there. I don't know what's going to happen. The Chinese government has said, and I kind of take them at their word because they don't have the same economic interests as TikTok does. We're not going to allow the sale of TikTok because there's important important algorithms that we don't want the U.S. to have. And while that seems silly on the face of it, they certainly have the power to do it. So,
well, it's certainly not an effective PR campaign to get Congress to back off.
Yeah,
but,
it doesn't make me trust TikTok
we're going to do exactly what you.
There's a lot of reasons not to trust TikTok, but they even, when TikTok posted a message saying, "Write your member of Congress," they got flooded. Yeah. And Congress said, "Look, see, we told you."
No,
huge influence.
I mean, I understand it got panned, but I actually liked it, and arguably, other tech companies probably should have rallied their troops to say, "Do you realize how you're being affected by the things that are getting discussed in Congress?" And I think when people realize how much it affects them, that also does connect the dots for Congress, because I think Congress is not paying attention to how much it is going to affect the lives of its constituents. I think if it did know, it might exercise more caution.
Yeah. If the reason I mentioned the Chinese government's unwillingness to sell TikTok is it changes the equation dramatically. If you say, no, we're not saying it should be owned by a U.S. company. We're saying shut it down. Put it out of business. No U.S. citizen should have anything like TikTok. Then I think it focuses the mind. That would be gone. It strikes me as a bit of a loss. But on the other hand, I agree with you, Brianna. If they are a threat to us as America, then that's something to be considered too. So this is a tough one. I don't think there's an obvious right answer.
Why would you take the CCP at their word immediately with the first public statement that they put out? This is like, I do follow foreign policy enough to know this is a normal thing that they do, right? They'll insist and they'll try to signal that nothing will be done, and they'll insist they'll take the most drastic step, and then the political process kicks in and you come to a compromise. I think you're falling for something that's a real scaremongering tactic. I'm
not sure. I thought we were deciding that the Chinese government said the thing that was actually like as scary as everybody thought it was, and we do believe them. But that notwithstanding, I don't think it changes what the policy reaction should be. And I think the distilling bit about like if it were so I think Leo's point was if it was just a ban, we might recognize the speech interest more directly because it goes away. I think if it's a forced sale, and whether that's allowed by China or not, it is irrelevant. But all the people coming out of the woodwork wanting to buy it, I think, puts into stark contrast the fact that this is really a privacy problem, because we're no better off with.
Steve Mnuchin wants to buy it.
I don't want him to have it either. Like that really sort of.
He wasn't the worst member of Trump's cabinet, not by a long shot.
But that helps crystallize the fact that maybe we're not actually focusing on the correct problem here. So either way,
I think we can all stipulate that privacy is not being protected in general by the United States Congress.
Right.
And that this is we may disagree on whether this is a performative law or something that needs to be done, but it doesn't really address the larger privacy issue at all.
I mean, I think it's probably a mixed bag. Like all the bad policy that comes out of Congress is an amalgamation of a whole bunch of interests, some of which are genuine and some of which are cynical. And I think for some people, I mean, this is a big issue. Something scary is going on. China's looking pretty scary, and something must be done. And they may legitimately really want to, something must be done. I want to do it. Like, that may be coming from a good place, but I don't think it's got enough of a grasp of what the policy problem actually is. And then I think they've got some political bedfellows of, I don't like that, the things that people are talking about on TikTok, and oh, good, here's a chance to make them stop talking about these things on TikTok, and they'll go on Team Anti-China to help push that policy because that's going to get them what they want. I think we've got multiple things going on, but everybody in Congress needs to take a better look at what the actual problem is and what the full impacts of the regulatory quote-unquote solution would be, and nobody's doing that.
Brianna, one of your dear friends, Bobby Kotick, is also in the market for. He says,
I love Bobby.
He says, I'll buy TikTok.
Free time these days.
I'll buy TikTok.
Oh, he's such a good person.
Really, seriously, if the two people who said, we'd buy it, are Steve Mnuchin and Bobby Kotick, that does kind of, Rob, you're right. That tells you something about the value of what TikTok's
got.
got.
To wonder when.
Cathy, I want to ask you a straight question. I want to determine where your principles are because, okay, media's not in a great place in this country right now overall. So let's say we wake up tomorrow and Vladimir Putin goes to all the Russian oil oligarchs and puts together something. Mark Zuckerberg is brought up on some charges or whatever and decides to sell Facebook. Russia's got control of like Facebook. And then Washington Post, which has just had a bunch of layoffs, they get bought out by China. And then because our media ecosystem is falling apart, other nations around the world go, you know what? Instead of funding a bunch of tanks and helicopters and cruise missiles, let's just buy out all these American media companies. And then slowly, bit by bit, we find out that every bit of American media is controlled by our enemies. Am I correct to understand if that scenario happened, that hypothetical, you'd still be like, free speech issue, that's just dandy. Like, you really wouldn't have a problem with that?
Because that's what gets us alternatives. We can stop reading the Washington Post, the New York Times, and anybody else when we've got, like, I'm on team making sure independent media is going to be able to publish.
Actually, wouldn't that be a separate issue that you can block the sale of a U.S. company to a foreign company? There's existing law, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., CFIUS, for those in the know, that is a thing, and it's easier to block the sale of a U.S. company. There was a case where a Chinese company was going to have control over Grindr, the gay dating app. CFIUS forced the divestment of that. Yeah. I guess because that was less strategic to Xi Jinping, who, for the record, I think sucks, just to be clear.
Nobody here is in favor of the
stop
CCP.
The next time
I think we can safely say that.
They're bad people.
It's there's also, by the way, Brianna, let me ask you the same hypothetical. Yeah. If this costs President Biden the election because young people then don't vote, if it causes retaliation by the Chinese government against U.S. companies, like, let's say, Apple, kicking them out, would that be okay with you? I mean, there are consequences on either side.
I think he's insane to be doing this before the election. I think it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It makes my job 10 times harder. The timing is terrible. Right. So I think it's not good for anybody. The Democratic Party not understanding this. But I think this is, the world is not in a great national security state right now. I think there's a 1 in 3 chance that we're going to be in a swear-to-God war with China over Taiwan in the next few years. Ukraine is not going well. Like, democracy is weakening all around the globe. And the information ecosystem that we swim in is a major reason for that. And I respect y'all, but I think you're really undercutting that in your analysis.
By the way, our Discord points out you can watch RT, Russian TV in the United States. You can watch CCTV, Chinese TV in the United States, both of which
because you have a First Amendment right to also consume information. 2 points I want to make. What I'm saying is that I am going to not sacrifice the constitutional doctrine that makes sure that we have alternatives and the ability for nascent independent press and voices to continue to be able to speak to each other. What I will absolutely stand against is just because the big things and the corporate things are bad, I'm not going to do something that scorches the earth so we don't get the independent voices to ultimately rebuild, rebirth, and at least allow our pamphleteering and talking to each other to happen, because if that goes away, then we're completely at the mercy of any foreign or domestic power that wants to do us in. Second point to make, I was sort of amused at the hypothetical because it isn't really a hypothetical. Some of it is already happening in the context that you're talking about. And then I play in the copyright wars, and copyright is very alienable. And are you paying attention? I don't mean you in a pejorative way, but like, is anyone paying attention to who is actually buying the massive catalogs? Like, who owns our cultural repertoire now locked up for years and years and years because we keep extending copyright terms? Like, this problem is already here, and I'm not going to, I stand against that. If we're taking the measure of me, I think that I'm not against the alienability of copyright, but I'm certainly against the maximalist ownership and lockout potential that an owner has. That's actually where I think we are already. The hypothetical is real, and we're kind of just sleepwalking into that problem. So buying up the Washington Post thing.
I don't understand your argument. How does copyright apply to a hostile foreign power?
They're owning our ability to sing our own songs, essentially. I mean, just as one simple sentence that narrows it down. It's more complex in that it's bigger than that, but that is one bottom line.
Are foreign companies buying copyrights to American content?
Yeah, they're buying out now the music catalogs. They can buy out, I mean, you already had record company consolidation, and you had, foreign investors who are owning, like, the major record labels.
The Canadians! The Bronfmans are buying us out.
I mean, I'm not crazy about it being locked up by any American oligarch, but copyright is inherently alienable. You kind of want it to be, because our entire economic regime of it is built to, that's where the injection of the capital comes in. But the more we keep also making that what you can buy when you buy a copyright becomes more and more valuable, and the lockout power becomes stronger and stronger. Any foreign power essentially can lock us out of our own cultural repertoire, especially the more we undermine fair use. No, the hypothetical is real, and I don't think we're spending nearly enough time talking about it. I need to write about it more, but hey, here's the headline of something I've been thinking about for quite some time.
Yeah. Vivendi's a French company. UMG is a foreign company.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. And by the way, UMG pulled all their music off TikTok. So there.
Yeah.
Let me take a break.
I mean, it's nice when you can just knock all the heads together. But
and not to mention Bill Gates buying up all the farmland in America. Where's he from? Oh, well, never mind. That's Cathy Gellis. She is an actual practicing attorney at law. You can find her at cgcounsel.com, COUNSEL.com, and her very astute writings on Tech Dirt. It's wonderful having you here. Brianna Wu, Brianna Wu. Besides being a speedrunner at Princess Peach, she is the executive director of Rebellion Pack. And watch out, because she's buying your personal information online, even as we speak.
No, I target you with ads if I have a politician that I think has a policy that you would agree with.
I said.
To talk you into voting. Yes.
And I don't mind, although can you knock off the text messages? Because
Dude, I want this whole space regulated within an inch of its life.
Kidding.
Oh my God.
It is going to be a tough year as we head into the fall elections.
Oh my God.
We just had our primary here in California, and I just kept saying stop. And they do. Fortunately, that law does work. They do stop if you say stop, but they have plenty of other numbers to use. And I think they got my number from Act Blue. I might be wrong, but I think they got my number from Act
Blue. Cannot sell your number.
They can't?
I've talked to them about this so many times. News. What happens is someone list matches it and compares it with another database and gets your information that way. Even though legally they shouldn't, it is a practice and no one is prosecuting.
Because somebody got my number. I don't know how. And then I remember when I got my Mint Mobile number sponsor, I guess it had been owned prior to that by a guy who'd skipped out in his students' loans and was an avid MAGA supporter. Because, man, you should have seen both the dunning notices saying, you got to pay your loans, dude. And when are you giving me money from every Republican in Congress? So that was a lot of fun. I saw my father-in-law's phone. Holy cow. Once you donate, I don't know how they do it, but once you pick a side, that side inundates you with stuff. Yeah. It's endless. And it can be a lot of fun, And Rob Pegoraro is here. Pegoraro.
Yes, sir.
It's a nice Venetian name. Pegoraro. Yes. You actually have a video on your website on the About tab on how to pronounce it.
It is always mispronounced a lot of the time at airport. Well, passenger people's brains just lock up halfway. I'm just say it like it's spelled.
It's very easy. It's just like it's spelled. Pegoraro.
In Italy, it's more Pegoraro.
Pegoraro.
That part of the family, we don't know what sort of sales pitch was involved to get somebody to emigrate from Vicenza and then settle in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. But once you go there, the vowels get flattened, and so is Pegoraro.
Pegoraro.
It's kind of a Midwest thing.
Aw.
Yeah. But Pegoraro is okay, but if you put in other vowels or freeze halfway through, that's not the correct way to say it.
Keep the schwa, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Our show today anyway, it's great to have all three of you. And honestly, the heated conversations are always the best. Don't hold back. It's fine. Our show today brought to you, speaking of heat, by HIMS. HIMS. HIMS is changing men's health care by providing convenient access to science-backed treatments for erectile dysfunction, hair loss, weight loss, and more. Now, you look at me and you're probably thinking, well, which one is Leo doing? Hims offers a 100% online process so you can get a new routine for improving your overall health faster. Actually, I shouldn't be flip about this. This is something every guy considers, thinks about, should be aware of, and it's kind of embarrassing sometimes to go to your personal physician and talk about it. Fortunately, you don't have to. Hims has an array of high-quality options. You can get pills or chews for ED, serums, sprays, oral options for hair loss. The medication, if prescribed, and yes, of course, you have to get it prescribed. They do it all on the up and up, ships directly to you for free, no cost, and in discreet packaging. No one is going to know. It's between you and your Hims doctor. One low price for your treatments. That includes online visits, ongoing shipments, provider messaging. You don't need insurance. And it's very affordable. Manage your plan on the Hims app. You can track progress. You can learn more about your conditions. Information's key, and how to treat them from leading medical experts. I think Hims is a great solution. Start your free online visit today. Hims.com/twit, HIMS.com, Hims.com/twit for your personalized treatment options. Hims.com/twit. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See Hims.com/twit for details and, of course, important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Hims.com/twit. We thank them so much for their support of This Week in Tech. Well, let's see. Apple and TikTok. I think we've settled both of those. Your Honor?
Until next time.
First time a judge wears an avocado shirt in court, but, there's always a first
It may
time.
not be.
I don't want to know what you're.
No, I'm just surmising.
Don't they have to wear robes?
Well, they might.
Underneath the robes.
Yeah,
How about an avocado tie? Somebody in California.
And sometimes
must have
judges
done that.
appropriately engage in whimsy. So
Appropriate engagement
sometimes
in whimsy.
Judicial
inappropriately they
whimsy
engage
is
in
one of those-
whimsy, but
I think we need more judicial whimsy in our lives.
I don't know. Actually, every time they quote like song lyrics in their decisions, it tends to actually be a disaster. There is some reason to be said for not bringing the whimsy into the law, but occasionally maybe appropriate
Judicial whimsy or judicial cringy?
Cringy whimsy.
It's going to be cringy even when it's right. Yeah.
But I think as somebody who has to read a lot of briefings and pleadings and decisions, that you probably appreciate it once in a while when a little whimsy sneaks in.
The problem is it tends to actually, the more I agree with where the judge is going, I think the more it actually weakens the rhetorical value of the point that they're making.
Yes, be serious.
Yeah.
So you may not support the new Tennessee law, first U.S. state protecting musicians from AI. It's the ELVIS Act.
I'm not a fan.
The retronym is for Ensuring Likeness, Voice, and Image Security, ELVIS. Bill Lee signed it into law on Thursday. I mean, you might be a fan of the idea to protect artists from unauthorized use by artificial intelligence, or no?
Well, I'm not on, in very little of this am I ever on nothing to see here. There's absolutely no policy tension whatsoever. So I think they're, I think the deep fakes can be a problem, but I think
on the other hand,
but not every regulatory solution, especially one rushed through, is going to be a good one that solves it, that doesn't create other problems.
And I love hearing Johnny Cash sing the Barbie Girl song. I just think
there's some really creative things that people can legitimately do. And there's some issues with tightening what we sometimes refer to as like the pseudo intellectual property doctrines. They are somewhat untethered and not very doctrinally pure, and they end up giving a lot of disproportionate power that does cause a tremendous amount of First Amendment tension.
It's pretty good work. Honestly, I sort of have to stop having, from what I've read of the other output of the Tennessee legislature, these are the people who were in such a rush to let's kick out the outsbroken black guy.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about them.
Yeah.
But it makes me nervous.
So I understand, and this is actually a large, I brought it up just because of the judicial whimsy, but in this case, the legislative whimsy. But I do think there is a very strong tension between the creatives who want to keep AI from getting involved in their content at all. And people, and I include myself in this group, who think AI should proceed untrammeled because that's the only way you're going to get a really good AI.
So the whole name, image, likeness thing, one of the panels I saw at South by Southwest, in between stuffing free tacos in my face, was SAG-AFTRA's chief negotiator, Duncan Crabtree Ireland, talking about how the Actors Union brought Hollywood to heel on the subject of AI. But then he said, what we need to deal with deepfakes is some way to control the commercial use of your name, image, and likeness. I don't have a case I can bring when somebody does a deepfake of me trying to undercut SAG-AFTRA's agreement with the studios. Which I heard
he's
that
not protected.
Right. But creating new kinds of intellectual property can lead to all kinds of nasty consequences. And I am skeptical that that's how we want to, that should be the first tool we reach for in the drawer. Right. Drawer, there's my Jersey accent, when we see some misuse of technology.
I agree. I will say drawer as well, just to demonstrate my accent, and also say that. Oh, and it's a Florida orange, just so we're clear.
It is an orange. Yes.
It's an orange. It's from Florida. And I will say yes, +1 to what Rob is saying. Like, not to say that there's a lot of the stuff that's happening feels creepy. But just because it feels creepy doesn't mean there should be a law. And even to the extent that there is...
Oh, I love that. Underscore that. Just because it feels creepy doesn't mean there ought to be a law.
Right. And to the extent that there should be a law, it should be a careful law, because there be dragons when you start to just ignore the First Amendment. But even to just get off that hobby horse of... unintended consequences are rife with any sort of policy action. And I don't think anybody in the Tennessee legislature was fully vetting what the consequences are.
No, they like the name the ELVIS Act. I think
they like the name.
But who's going to vote against Elvis?
But I think there's also an interesting schism. And I don't remember exactly which side was which, but I think if I'm guessing, the RIAA was on one side and the MPA was actually on the other. What? And I think one of it was... one of the organizations is sort of recognizing that a law like this could impinge certain creative freedom that they were counting on having. Now, maybe for the most cynical, profit-driven reasons possible, but I think if there is that recognition that they can sense that it will impinge on something expressive that they want to do, they may not be wrong. And so it's unusual to have the two organizations not on the same side, but I think in this case, they were not on the same side.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of protecting creatives, although, as Corey has pointed out, and as you just pointed out, copyright really is no longer about preserving an individual's right to own their works, but in fact, large corporations' right to swoop up every bit of work they can and profit from it.
Well, we've talked before about, training. Like, I think training as a discrete thing really needs to be unfettered, and the way we've talked about it is the right to read, because if you can read all the books, then your tools can help you read all the books, and if your tools are software helping you read all the books, well, so be it.
I've seen people say, though, why are you saying that a machine or a company reading your stuff is the same as a human reading your stuff? Of course, everybody accepts the right to read for a human, but why should that extend to a company?
You can't use tools. I mean, you can't use Cliff's Notes. You can't, I'm not entirely sure there's a way to say, oh, you can do this, but not this. I don't think there's a logical place to draw that line.
Where do you draw the line?
You can use tools, and you can use software tools, because isn't it cool that the software can help you glom onto and process information a lot faster? So if you're using it as a study aid and you want to scan a whole bunch of text and then be able to ask the computer okay, what did you do there?
By the way, I do that all the time.
Okay, so
that's what AI is really good at.
Yeah, so it's basically the same thing. It's an individual behavior, but we're not liking it because this individual behavior is being exercised by a company. And then the company wants to profit from outputs, and so we're cynical about that. But I think you really need to kind of file off the training as an individual discrete thing and say that no, copyright law does not stand in the way of it. Maybe copyright law stands in the way of some forms of output. Let's have that conversation. But I don't like the way we conflate input, output, training, toggling, inputs and stuff like that. You have to look at everything on its... Team Nuance will tell you that you need to look everything on an individual, what is going on here, and you can't just conflate things.
I don't often agree with Sam Altman, but he did say if you only allow AI to train on public domain content, you're not going to get much of an AI.
No, it's going to be a very skewed sample and a very skewed voice, and that's the problem with...
Honestly, we want it to train on everything.
Yeah.
We really want the most content possible. Do you agree, Brianna?
No, I don't.
I didn't think you would.
Hey, now.
That's why I asked.
Cathy, my hope that we can still be friends after this panel is that every lawyer I've ever met loves to argue, and that's why they go into that field. So I hope that at least I can be a good rhetorical.
I just like being right. So
Them's fighting words.
Okay. So this is, I was with you as far as the first example, the music. It seems to me that getting the state legislature of Tennessee to adjudicate that is probably not going to lead to good public policy. I would be inclined to let the civil courts figure that out, figure out if damages have been done, let major music labels get involved. That said, you come back to the other. And my principle here is tending to democracy. And I think if you're looking at the media landscape right now, it is in really, really rough shape. It is a bad time to be a media company. I don't care how big or how small you are. So if you're taking something like the entire store of value of decades of New York Times reporting, and AI can just come suck that up, and then I pay for ChatGPT, it can spit that output out and help me analyze stuff. It's a helpful tool for me, clearly, but that is going to affect the New York Times has invested a ton of money in that information, and it seems like that's just tapping that database. I think that's true across media. There's a huge trend right now where SEO results, if you're trying to get information on tech products, I urge everyone listening to this right now, go look this up. Think about a new graphic card and just go try to find a review of a new graphic card or a new CPU. Those used to happen. They don't happen anymore. And you get a bunch of SEO clickbait garbage that's AI created using just data and performance specs about the piece that doesn't put it in any journalistic context. I want these tools to be built, but I think it's reasonable to say to, everything from the New York Times to GameSpot that, the public needs to access this information, but what you're saying has value, and we don't just want to let AI come along and steal all that value from you. That doesn't seem quite fair to me. I don't know why they shouldn't be paying licensing fees.
Journalist on this panel, I've absolutely agreed that my industry is not great, Bob. So one point I was going to make, we were talking about what the sort of revival of antitrust action. I think the DOJ case brought against Google's display ads business, where Google has set itself up so it is at every level. They have a quote from a Google executive in the DOJ complaint that it's as if Goldman and Citibank ran the New York Stock Exchange. It's a bad state of affairs. The programmatic ad industry, I don't think, is serving readers or publishers very well. It's working great for Google, and it's a convenient monopoly. And that's a case where you have the vast majority of state AGs in the U.S. also thinking that Google is up to no good. So to sort of circle back to Apple, I don't think that work is on the same level as the Google display ads case. You were going to solve my industry's business model problem, please?
Hey, it's not just your industry. We're suffering too. Everybody in independent media is really suffering. And then, of course, the larger media companies. Some are doing all right. New York Times doing all right. Your former journal, maybe not so much. The Washington Post had to lay off 1,500 people a couple of months ago.
Not 1,500. I think it was 150.
150. Okay,
did so
I added
in a very ham-handed way.
Yeah, it was not good though.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, as long as we're talking about AI, New York Times points out in one key AI metric, we might be in a little bit of trouble. China is now producing far more top AI engineers than the United States. Currently, new research shows that China has eclipsed the U.S. as the biggest producer of AI talent. About 50% of the world's top AI researchers are from China. By contrast, the U.S., 18%, a number which hasn't changed much over the last few years. It was China that jumped. They used to produce about a third of the world's AI engineering talents 3 years ago. The United States has not changed. Is that a cause for concern? I mean, one of the things I do bring up is that even if we decide we should constrain our AIs and we should pause our AIs or we should in some way regulate our AIs, there are plenty of other countries that won't.
That's inherently true. I mean, a lot of this is, bailing a leaky boat. Like, it doesn't matter. Or, no, that's not the metaphor. Maybe a deck chairs on the Titanic. It's just, you're doing something and there's a sense of, we have done something, but you've not done something useful because you can't control the world. Although, I suppose a lot of the people in Congress wish they could control the world.
They can.
Try, and they try. I think, though, in terms of your initial thing, the thought that came to my head is we are also, at this point, decimating our entire system of education. Yeah. And quite frankly,
that's actually more of a concern.
That's more of a concern because one of the things that any of these other unfriendly countries don't do as well and haven't done as well historically is intellectual freedom and the ability to, educate the masses and make sure that there is free expression and understanding that. We're just taking all of our value out of why a country much smaller than some of these can be a global power. We're just decimating everything that gave us that special sauce, and that's the bigger problem. Like more than
what is it that we're doing wrong with our education
all
system?
Of it at this point? I mean, including just making it.
How much time do we got?
Yeah, you're making it inaccessible, and at this point,
are we
useless.
Underfunding it?
Underfunding it, and also really unclear on what the value of an education is, including a liberal arts education. Yeah. That matters for all the STEM stuff too. Because
I've seen people say, if you want to become an AI scientist, don't study computer science, become a generalist, because ultimately a liberal education is going to give you a better grounding in the world and make you a better AI scientist.
I mean, especially if you're thinking about something that's so language-based, you sort of need to understand how human beings use language and have used language. You're trying to build artificial intelligence, you need the social sciences to understand what the human intelligence was doing.
So by over-focusing on STEM, perhaps we're training people who are...
That's a mistake, and quite frankly, a lot of the just tearing up tenure, tearing up a lot of the universities, just destroying them as...
But they're bastions of liberal thought, don't you know?
That was the point. So, there's...
You mean a liberal education is the same thing as liberal politics?
Yeah, but there's some really cynical things happening from the red team, but even the blue team is underfunding and doesn't really understand or is just putting the money in STEM, but that's not the beginning and ending of good education.
We live in a blue state, and I have to say the standards for public education in California have dropped dramatically, as have our test scores as a result, I think.
Yeah. If I could just, coming back to the issue with China, producing more AI specialists, this is, I feel like I'm on the National Security Watch today.
That's good. Somebody needs to. Good.
This is a huge NatSec issue. There's a rumor going around that like OpenAI and ChatGPT is not going to be able to scale until there's a massive, massive infusion of hardware because what they're doing is so computationally expensive. And there are rumors going around that the U.S. government may end up getting involved in this. Why would the United States government need to get involved in this? Because the military technology of the future is going to need AI. It's already a part of it. Not to get into current politics, but when someone is going through and like trying to decide if they're going to bomb a site or not bomb a site, there are AI algorithms that go through right now and determine, like, okay, let's look at the population here. What is the percentage based on our math the civilian is going to be like killed here? The weapons of tomorrow are going to be like, if you think things are smart today, imagine once we get AI technology baked into that. So China having a strategic advantage when it's already unclear if we would win a naval battle with China, like this is a really, really big deal. So I want us to quadruple down on producing graduates. I think that for things like this that are in the national interest, I think it should be completely free to go to college for. And I think this is something that should really, really scare us, not just because we're not going to have that expertise at like being generated here at home. There was a company in Massachusetts that brought in Chinese interns because they did not have the data expertise. They ended up stealing absolutely all of their intellectual intellectual property and fled the country.
Oh,
that ended up going out of business here.
Yikes.
So it's a national security crisis top to bottom, and we got to get serious about it.
We did at least pass the Chips and Science Act in August of 2022. Intel, in fact, has just received another, I think, $20 billion in federal funding from the U.S. government to build chip plants in the United States. We are doing something, right? There is some concern, though, that we don't have the educational systems to support this expansion, that we don't have enough engineers. And maybe I don't know, maybe we'll have to bring in some more Chinese engineers to steal our technology. I think there's attention being paid to this. I don't know if it's sufficient.
Well, attention versus useful attention, useful, appropriately credulous, and that's the depressing thing. I mean, hard problems need, good thinking to dig ourselves out, and this is not what we necessarily excel at. Rob,
you and I were talking about Ron Wyden, the senator from Oregon, and his very accomplished chief of technology. Is he chief of staff or chief technology?
Technology advisor.
Chris Sagoyan,
the former chief technologist with the ACLU.
Brilliant guy. Yep. And certainly knows what he's talking about. Wyden seems to, as a result, know what he's talking about.
He's known what he's talking about for a long time.
Yeah. I guess you have to be smart enough to hire Chris Sagoyan in the first place.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's some hope. Did you face this in your congressional run, Brianna? I mean, I know one of the reasons you wanted to run is to add some smarts to Congress.
No, it's a huge issue, top to bottom. Like this kind of expertise, particularly in Boston. We have to bring. We have two industries here. It's tech and it's biotech, and we have a lot of people that come here from outside the U.S. to do this. So it is a real problem that we're not creating this kind of expertise at home, and I think we should get serious about it.
Let's take a little break. Rob Pegoraro is here.
Just let him introduce himself on the
Hey, Robbie.
Just call me Pego for
Roberto Pegoraro is here. It's great to have you, Rob, anytime you're in town, or even not. Brianna Wu, who is, of course, way across the country in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And it's wonderful to have Cathy Gellis, who comes up whenever we can get her up here.
It's nice to also not have the most prone to mispronunciation last name.
Yes, you win this time.
Yes,
that's my value.
Congratulations. Yeah. Our show today brought to you by Rocket Money. How many of you have subscriptions that you're paying every month for that you've completely forgotten about? This is where Act Blue comes into the act. I made a campaign contribution 2 years ago in the congressional cycle, and I didn't notice that at the bottom it said, would you like to give this every month? And for a year and a half, unwittingly, I was making major campaign contributions to an election that was already over. I'm sure the money went to a good cause, but thanks to Rocket Money, I discovered it and stopped it and saved a lot of money. 75% of all of you have subscriptions you've forgotten about. It's easy. We all have so many subscriptions. And Rocket Money helps you not only find them, but cancel them. Between streaming services and fitness apps and delivery services, I mean, it just goes on and on. Thanks to Rocket Money, I'm no longer wasting money on the ones I forgot. Rocket Money just found one. I had I think it was a DoorDash Pro subscription or whatever for my mom, except she's been in an independent living facility for 6 months. She's not using DoorDash. Thank you, Rocket Money. It's a personal finance app that finds, and this is the best part, cancels your unwanted subscriptions. It also does all the other things you want, monitors your spending, helps you lower your bills, so you can grow your savings, keep an eye on your investments. I could see everything in one place, including all my subscriptions. And if I see one, which happens pretty regularly, that I didn't know about or I didn't want or it's been going on for longer than I thought, Rocket Money can help me cancel it with a few taps. They'll even deal with customer service for you. Rocket Money, more than 5 million users now. It's such a success story. It saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when you use all the app's features. It saved me a lot more than that, I can tell you right now. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/twit. rocketmoney.com/twit. It really works. And there's no reason not to try it. rocketmoney.com/twit. All right, let's find something happy. Oh, I know, the Supreme Court.
Sigh.
So they heard oral arguments this week.
I can't believe it, but yes, I think it was this
week. It was early this week on Murthy versus Missouri. But everybody knows this case. This is the case of the government talking to social media about vaccine misinformation, terrorist accounts,
CISA-related.
CISA stuff, foreign accounts, bots, things. And the debate, of course, is whether they should be allowed to do that.
Well, it shouldn't have been a debate, but somehow it ended up with the Fifth Circuit saying, no, they should not be allowed to do this, and issuing an injunction that prevented these conversations. In theory, it is a limited injunction. In effect, it's a across-the-board injunction with a huge chilling effect that's already been endured because there's really no way to figure out what's okay and what's not okay. And oral argument was heard on Monday, and I am tentatively optimistic that the Supreme Court is not buying what the plaintiffs were selling. I'm not entirely sure I'm completely comfortable with some of it because there's been some media coverage about Kavanaugh and Kagan, who used to be in government service and other capacities, talking about how we're always talking to the press and saying, knock it off with this sort of coverage, this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of ugh, but I don't think ugh does not necessarily rise to a First Amendment violation. And most of what was alleged is a very weak record. Oh, and Justice Sotomayor, I believe, took the plaintiffs to task in their brief for seriously misstating the record in terms of who said what and what the context was and what the consequences were. That everything alleged reads much more insidious than it actually was.
That they, in fact, and there's emails to prove it, we're not ordering these companies to take down content, but we're informing Twitter and others that this content was misinformation or...
Like one of them that was, like, in theory, on the face of it, most egregious was somebody in the Biden administration really being like, you do this right now. And I was like, oh, gosh, whatever. That's no way to, speak to a platform. But it turns out that the...
that's no way to talk to a platform.
If you are the government.
Yeah. First Amendment protects that platform.
Well, so we've got a couple things up in the air. But that one was, I think, pointed out, and I think maybe Mike Masnick covered it in Tech Dirt, that I think it was actually... Biden's own Instagram account where something screwy had happened, and he's complaining about, like, fix this because it's my account, as opposed to fix this because I am the government and telling you to fix it.
That seems okay.
And that isn't, a significant distinction.
Yeah.
So there's a number of problems with this case. One of which I don't think is getting a lot of attention, is how it is that Missouri and Louisiana are state plaintiffs with any form of Article III standing to complain about an injury here. And the oral argument didn't really speak to that, but they were pretty dismissive to, I think, the individual plaintiffs, as the record isn't there. And of course, the government needs to be able to, the government needs to be able to talk to the people, and the people need to be able to talk to the government. And just as a practical level, I don't think the Supreme Court thought that anything that was being alleged was First Amendment problematic, because they're kind of like, conversations between government and media have happened for generations. And what do you mean that shouldn't happen? That is a thing that does happen. So I left, well, I wasn't there for this one, but I turned off my computer feeling slightly more optimistic. But
now, there won't be a decision till this summer, or?
I mean, it may be one of the last decisions, but it's also probably going... They heard another case at the same time, the NRA versus Volo case. That one was a little bit more insidious because it actually mimics a case called Backpage versus Dart, where Sheriff Dart in Illinois was putting a lot of pressure on services that I think the payment providers that Backpage was using, where he couldn't crush Backpage himself. He tried to put the squeeze on other services they needed as a way of shutting down Backpage by proxy. And something pretty similar seems to have happened in the NRA case. And that is one where that level of government interference might not satisfy the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court might be right to sort of say, there's a foul here. I'm less sure how that case will go. I haven't followed it as critically, but I think the appropriate inquiry was being made, so we'll see how that one shakes out. And then there's what I'm referring to as the net choice cases, which I want to apologize. That's a bad way to refer to them, partly because these cases were net choice and CCIA, so there's two plaintiffs, and I don't mean to eliminate one of them.
But we all call it the net choice case.
Because it's this pair that's the lead petitioner on these cases.
These are the Texas and Florida.
These are the Texas and Florida cases.
Media laws.
And the other problem with calling it the net choice cases is net choice, I think to its credit, is challenging all sorts of crappy legislation that's coming out of the states.
There are many net choice cases.
And so there are many net choice cases, including net choice v. Bonta, which is challenging one of the quote unquote age appropriate design laws, which are a problem unto themselves. But getting back to the Supreme Court net choice cases, that's the one that I think is even more meaningful. Will the Supreme Court recognize, and we were talking about this earlier, that the model that the First Amendment follows when applied to the internet is more the newspaper model, where the government hands off. You look at a case like Miami Herald
versus... You
shouldn't
be even saying anything at all.
That the editorial discretion of the media entity is something that the government cannot touch, because it's not Spectrum, it's not radio, it's not TV. Right. It is close to the case like Miami Herald versus, I was saying Tornillo, but I've been told it was an Italian, so I think it's Tornillo. That in that case, there was a Florida law that said you had to run op-eds from candidates that the newspaper didn't like and didn't want to support. And they're like, no, the government, and the Supreme Court decided, no, even where there's market consolidation, the government still doesn't get to say that, control the editorial pages.
That sounds a lot like the fairness doctrine, but again, that was about that was more Spectrum related,
and it may not have actually been good policy anyway.
Yeah.
But so the key question in the net choice cases is, will the Supreme Court recognize that the First Amendment model for the internet and platforms being able to moderate and choose what expression to host, what expression not to host, who to associate with, etc., is a core First Amendment right belonging to those platforms? If the court says yes, our internet is going to be a lot more protected, and then it is going to ripple down into these other cases, because then when you go and you look at the Murthy case, that's actually one where if they didn't have the First Amendment right to resist the government, like, it's implicated in this case, because as long as the platforms have the ability to say no, the government can call up and say, we'd like you to take this down, but as long as the platform is in a position to say no, that's okay. But if they never had the First Amendment right to say no, then it wouldn't be a First Amendment violation if the government took the ability to say no away. So you kind of need that core fundamental thing to ripple down through these other cases, and it will matter basically for every piece of internet regulation of, do the platforms have a recognizable First Amendment right on their own to choose what expression they facilitate and what expression they don't facilitate. If the court says no, I think we have big problems, but I am cautiously optimistic after having sat there for 4 hours listening to them thrash this out. They will probably say yes, but I don't know if that decision will be a clean one. But I was feeling a little bit better by the time they got to the Murthy case, where it almost seemed like they had decided that the newspaper model was the appropriate one. And if that's true, then I don't know, everything else in the country is screwed up, but maybe the internet and First Amendment policy won't be quite as much, and I will have some better tools to go fight the stupid regulations with. I'm very worried about what I lose if they decide otherwise.
You agree, Rob?
Yeah, well, I talked to Cathy for a piece I did about the first Judge Doughty's opinion for the New Republic, where Cathy pointed out, yes, there's a lot of jawboning. The government's saying you need to do something about this. There's a problem with anti-vax misinformation, election misinformation. But what they don't document was the plaintiffs don't prove that there's an or else. Do this or else. And the opinion overall, like, I found it insultingly bad.
You called it legal gibberish.
The judge says, if the allegations made by plaintiffs are true, the present case arguably involves the most massive attack against free speech in United States history. What the? Nonsense. Like, in the 1920s, we put actual socialists in jail. There is no possible universe where the feds
is the most massive
saying
attack,
that Facebook... you should do more about misinformation, even if the government is wrong in that, is the same as putting people in jail. And I thought you had to know that if you were to actually graduate from law school, much less be appointed to have a lifetime gig as a judge.
I hate to tell you, you can graduate law school without ever taking a First Amendment class.
It's possible to be asleep the day they teach law in law school.
Yeah. Well, that too. But there's a number of things that could easily escape your notice as you go through law school.
Yeah. So, the whole thing, it just seemed like this judge watched a lot of Fox News and really decided that the real victims here are the anti-vaxxers and the election deniers. And how dare that elected officials offer any value judgments on these cases whatsoever.
But it is likely that this is going to be overturned by the Supreme Court. This is not.
They kind of have to, yeah. I mean, it's just as a matter of law, public policy, just basic logic. No, this is a garbage opinion, and the Supreme Court should put it in the rubbish bin where it belongs. I
am cautiously optimistic. I don't think it's going to be 9-0, but I think there were enough justices who were like, this is dumb. We can see it's dumb.
If it's 7-2 and the two are Thomas and Alito, it's really like unanimous among the non-terrible.
You can't throw out two judges.
I would like to, honestly.
Yeah, well, okay.
The mystery was, what does Gorsuch think? I mean, Gorsuch wrote a decision I think is really, really good in the 303 creative decision, which I get criticized for as somebody who leans blue to say, no, this is actually what you would want if you want to actually stand up for vulnerable populations. But I think he wrote, with one small exception, which really doesn't ruin it, I think a doctrinally pure decision. And quite frankly, the Sotomayor dissent was really, really disappointing. And it gets quoted in the Murthy plaintiff's briefs of like all the arguments she made that are like, that can't possibly be how the First Amendment works, because somebody in government is going to be a decider of what is the good content, what is the bad content.
So what do we want? We want it possible for the FBI or the Surgeon General to say to social network, hey, guys, you should just know this is a bad actor posting this. Mike publishes in on Tech Dirt some examples of these emails. Here's one from an FBI email address. Says, whatever your review determines an action Twitter deems is appropriate. Or, another one here saying, for your review and action as deemed appropriate. Is that what we want? The FBI to be able to be kind of this advisory capability, but it's ultimately up to the platforms? Or do we want just the government to say, not to tell the government, just none of your business, let them do their thing?
So I wrote an amicus brief in this case on behalf of Tech Dirt, the Copia Institute, one and the same. And we made a couple of points. One of them is we didn't file directly on the government side because we kind of pointed out that, look, I think step one is that the platforms have a First Amendment right to say no to the government. And if the government steps on that right and says, you do what we're telling you or else, I think that is a First Amendment violation and there should be a remedy. I don't think that's what happened here. But the other thing is that the remedy cannot be enjoining the government to such an extent that they can't talk to the platforms.
So they should have the ability to advise the platforms.
Because it's not just on their volition. Like, okay, any government entity can call up a platform and a platform can say buzz off. But what's happening in a lot of these things is the platforms wanted to have the conversation with the government.
They needed that information.
And we pointed out that there's also woven into the First Amendment is the right to petition. And the right to petition can be construed as the right to talk to your government. And right now, the platforms cannot talk to their own government, which is really fundamental to representative democracy, because the government can't take the call and have the conversation.
What about the argument, though, that even if the FBI says, you do what you want, that it's the FBI and it carries more weight than just me calling them up and saying, hey, that's...
The plaintiffs made that argument that basically, like, they think the or else is implied because some of these government agencies are big and scary, like the FBI. But we also pointed out, and I was reading my brief in a footnote, to say the thing that they were alleging that the FBI was talking about was that some foreign actors were actually trying to mess with the platforms, at which point the scarier thing to the platform was what the foreign areas were trying to do, not the FBI telling them. Right. So it really does presume a lot. Now, I think in general, I wish this case hadn't been such garbage, because there is a fair argument. Where's the line for when the government is making an offer they can't refuse? And I think that's the question that comes up more closely in the NRA case, the NRA versus Volo, of it wasn't so directly brought to them. It was basically like, we are going to make your life hell by telling everybody else what they need to do vis-a-vis you. And I think that's a bigger problem. There is a universe where the government could go too far. It isn't this universe, which is a problem. The other point they made that I think is valid, but they buried, so it never got adjudicated, is I think even what Kavanaugh and Kagan were saying is there's a lot of like behind the scenes dialogue between government and media. And if that ends up affecting the speech of other people and they're never aware of it, that does feel a little bit creepy because it's so untransparent. I don't know what you do about that policy problem, but that's not the lawsuit that they brought. That wasn't the one they did. They basically are like, we were on Facebook, we got off of we were driven off of Facebook, and we know that there was a conversation, so quid pro quo, and that's terrible, and somehow the state of Louisiana is going to sue for this.
Is it just a coincidence that 2 days after the oral arguments, the FBI resumed its efforts to share information with tech companies about foreign propaganda?
I don't know, maybe they were doing some vote counting. I mean, I might wait, but, you know.
That's interesting. It was put on hold in the wake of that lawsuit and the decision in Louisiana, but the program was resumed on Wednesday. You
really shouldn't get cocky with counting these things.
Yeah,
the Supreme Court, as we know, will break your heart. But there was a lot of the arguments that, you know, the people trying to fight this were making did not seem to be falling on deaf ears. Enough justices seemed to say, hang on a second, this can't possibly be right. And I mean, the moment when Sotomayor was very politely, very judicially pointing out, your brief is deceptive, is
that's not good.
It was,
you don't want to hear that from
every
justice.
Lawyer who's an advocate is having like a cringe moment with that.
Deceptive's not a good word.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember which words she used, but they were not words you wanted to hear if you were the advocate, and he was chagrined. Oops. Yeah.
Brianna, anything you want to add before we move on?
I'm good to go.
Yeah, smart, wise. Let's take a little break, and then I do want to talk about. I got about 20 more stories. We'll run through real quickly because we're getting long here. You're watching This Week in Tech with our great panelists, and it's great to have all three of you. Obviously, we love having Cathy on when there's a Supreme Court stuff going on because you're an expert on it, and of course, Brianna, whenever there's anything about the government involved. Rob Pegoraro is always great because he's just great all by himself.
I have my moments.
Without any effort. Our show today brought to you by Collide. You've heard us talk about Collide before, but there's some really good news. Collide has just been acquired by 1Password. Big news because both companies are leading the industry in creating security solutions that put users first. For over a year, Collide Device Trust has helped companies with Okta ensure that only known and secure devices can access their data. They're still doing it, but now part of 1Password, and that's good news. If you've got Okta and you've been meaning to check out Collide, now is a very good time. Collide comes with a library of pre-built device posture checks, so you can write your own custom checks for just about anything you can think of. Plus, you can use Collide on devices without MDM. That means things like your Linux fleet or contractor devices. And certainly every BYOD phone and laptop in your company can still use Collide. Now that Collide is part of 1Password, it's only going to get better. Check it out. KOLIDE, collide.com/twit. Learn more. Watch this demo. It's fantastic. It explains it beautifully. If you're using Okta, you need Collide, KOLIDE.com/twit. We thank them so much for their support of This Week in Tech. Oh, boy, there's so much more to talk about. Briefly, I don't know what the long-term impact of this is going to be, but I think I should mention it. I'm sure Steve Gibson will cover it. Speculative execution has been a problem in... yeah, you know what I'm talking about here. Processors from Intel and ARM, you know, about Spectre and Meltdown.
Oh, I thought you were meaning due process and the death penalty.
Yeah, you would think that, but no. We're talking chips here, baby.
Okay, all right, good.
This is chips, and it's been a problem on the Intel and ARM side for some time. Apparently, I'm sorry, AMD, not ARM, on the x86 side. Apparently, the same problem may be plaguing ARM devices. In fact, there is a new side channel attack on Apple's M series chips, the 1, 2, and 3, that leaks encryption keys, again, with speculative execution. And this problem apparently cannot be fixed. The flaws, I'm reading now from Dan Gooden's article at Ars Technica, a side channel allowing end-to-end key extractions when Apple chips run implementations of widely used cryptographic protocols cannot be patched directly because it stems from the microarchitecture of the silicon itself. It can only be mitigated by building defenses into the third-party cryptographic software, but that, just as with Spectre and Meltdown, severely degrades the performance, basically turns off, I'm guessing, speculative execution. Now, it's not something you as an M1, 2, or 3 user probably has to worry about. It's much more an issue in the server room because the targeted cryptographic operation and the malicious application have to run on the same CPU cluster. So either somebody have to have access to your computer, but mostly, just as with Spectre and Meltdown, this issue affects shared CPUs in servers and places like that.
Well, that is a big deal.
No, it sure is.
The way that, yeah. I mean, I remember when Russia targeted me, when I was running for office, the truth is hostile foreign powers, dedicate, really strong resources to running these kinds of attacks. I mean, imagine a senior person at DOD, right? Having their MacBook, all their emails read, all their security clearance. This is a non-trivial problem. People can't go to the SCIF every single time they need to look at top secret stuff. So there's so many parts of this that are concerning. There's the fact that this issue of speculative execution is baked into the M1, 2, and 3 chips already. That's problematic because we did have the preface of Spectre and Meltdown. The thing I couldn't believe about this story was, Leah, do you have the exact number? It was 123 days since they reported this to Apple, and Apple did not respond to it. And eventually they go, okay, well, we've done what we can. And then they went out and talked to the public about this. It's really concerning to me to see Apple not address this forthrightly. So every part of this is really concerning.
Yeah, this is from a team of researchers from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, UT Austin, Georgia Institute of Technology, UC Berkeley, University of Washington, Carnegie Mellon. This is a very credible report. It may be that Apple has nothing that they can do about it. They call it Go Fetch, breaking constant time cryptography implementations using data memory dependent prefetchers. That's where the name Go Fetch comes from. And as you point out, they've published now a proof of concept and more information about it. As usual, the companies that discover this stuff will wait, giving the company a chance to patch it. But after a certain amount of time, they go public with it. And we're at that point. So
I realize this is missing the point, but I keep wanting to make Pentium 5 jokes.
Why is that?
Remember the Pentium 5
floating point implementation?
What is 2 + 3? Well,
yeah.
We'll get back to you on that.
Seems like it was such an innocent time. That was
easy days. Those were the good old days. I don't know what Apple's going to do about this. There really isn't much to do about it. But again, a reminder, if you're a single user working at home, this isn't going to be a problem for you.
Threat model is an important thing to keep in mind when reading about things like this. Realistically, for the vast majority of people who are listening, who read the story, they will see their data compromised because they clicked on a link to enter their password at a phishing site.
That's much more dangerous.
Or they reused a password, or they did all the other things you're not supposed to do. This is a real problem, same way it was for Intel with Spectre and Meltdown. And I do not envy the job of the people who have to figure out how do you mitigate this in software, given the hardware. It's in the laptop, it's in the desktop, it's in my Mac Mini at home, and there's not much you can do about that.
Somewhat more relevantly, I'm looking at this and wanting to think about, does it change the right to repair ecosystem or a policy ecosystem? Because how do you fix it? If the chips are not fixable, wouldn't it be nice if you could pop it out and replace it with a new one?
But that's a long way to go for it.
You need a framework laptop to do that.
But Apple home brewing their own M4 chip.
And by the way, there's no chip you can go to that is not vulnerable to something like this.
No, but the point being that Apple has been, in particular, so although they may have moved around, so I don't know their latest positions, but they've been very resistant to, again, that walled garden, how tightly they engineer everything. And here's a bit where your product has a defect, and now you even can't cost-effectively fix it because your product was unfixable. And maybe if there's going to be any liability attached to it for how unfixable it is, maybe it causes the company to be a little more friendly towards not hot gluing everything and to make parts a little bit more poppable out.
I know Steve will be covering this on Tuesday on security. Well, I don't know for sure, but I would expect Steve will be covering this on security now. He'll give us a more technical explanation of what's going on. He will also, I'm sure, as he does every year, cover Pwn to Own, the wonderful, fun party they have in Vancouver every year where contestants can earn big prizes by hacking into systems. On the first day of Pwn to Own, contestants demoed 19 zero-day vulnerabilities. That you should understand that the people who compete in this save these all year long. They're saying, I found one. I'm going to bring it to Vancouver, and we're gonna make some money. Windows 11 was hacked. Tesla was hacked. Ubuntu Linux was hacked. The first day alone, $732,500 won by these teams, and a Tesla Model 3. Usually it's, if you can hack this, you win it. The first exploit was from Haboob SA's Abdulaziz Hariri using an Adobe Reader exploit. Rob, those are the good old days, huh? Adobe Reader exploit.
That's a deep cut right there.
Yeah. On Mac OS to earn $50,000.
You should be using Preview anyways. Come on.
Synactive, which is always a big player in these competitions, won a Tesla Model 3 and $200,000 after hacking the Tesla ECU with vehicle CAN bus control in under 30 seconds. This time with an integer overflow. By the way, the money usually comes from the companies that are being hacked because they want to find out what these are so they can fix them. Theory researchers earned $130,000 after escaping a VMware Workstation VM to gain code execution as system on Windows OS. Reverse Tactics collected $90,000 exploiting 2 Oracle VirtualBox bugs and a Windows UAF to escape the VM. And the final action of the day, this is all in the first day, Manfred Paul hacked Apple Safari, Google Chrome, and Microsoft Edge, exploiting 3 zero-day vulnerabilities, winning $102,500. Pwn to Own, always so much fun. Steve will have more Pwn to Own results. But after day one, Synactive, as often is the case, leading with 20 points.
Oh my goodness.
It's this, forget speed running. This is what, have you ever wanted to be like, an ethical white hat hacker to do this kind of thing?
Look, I don't know about you, but War Games was on growing up. That made me like, we all did that, like dialing until you would find someone and getting into their system. Like wasn't
the Whopper an early AI implementation?
WOPR,
or operations plan response?
You mean like?
Oh, very good. Even knew the acronym.
I got a head full of useless facts.
Shall we play a game?
And then we end up with the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. So let that be a lesson to you.
Talk about overreaction. That's a very good point. Yeah. Let's take a little time out. We've got a little video we'd like to play for you, recapping, and it's really for me because I wasn't here, all the fun we had this week on TWiT. Watch.
Previously on TWiT. TWiT News.
Welcome to GTC. Blackwell, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy this.
The largest chip physically possible. Oh my lord! Let's put 2 of them side by side. Oh, and then they just keep going.
for that chip.
Oh god, they're going to be on Mars before you know it.
I can't even conceptualize 645 exaflops.
Tech News Weekly.
The Department of Justice is suing Apple for violating antitrust laws. They're accusing Apple of illegally monopolizing the smartphone market by locking in customers and making experiences worse for rival products. I think what it is going to do is open up a really important conversations, how we need to put into place some guardrails over how dependent we are on these devices and the services that they offer.
MacBreak Weekly.
Apple talking to Google about licensing Gemini for use in iOS 18.
In addition to Google's doing a lot more work and probably ahead of Apple, there's also the case of we tell you it's by Gemini or by Google, and if something goes wrong, it's Google's fault, not Apple's fault. Because I think that Apple's self-correction process makes it really hard for AI to work.
This Week in Google.
A new Solana-based meme coin, Slurf, has faced significant challenges after the project's developer accidentally burnt a major portion of the token supply, effectively losing $10 million, or the entirety of the pre-sale participants' money.
Oh my God.
Guys, I effed up, the project's official X account wrote.
You're buying things from a sloth named Slorg? Why would you do that?
Micah, what you don't understand is the dog with hat currency might be able to purchase an ad on the Las Vegas skier. So
I don't.
The sadness in your eyes over just that
the
second.
The world is so broken.
Really wish you could bottle that.
TWiT. I got your Bitcoin right here.
What's even worse is that the same people who are doing this stupid stuff are now in charge of AI, and they think they can destroy the world.
I do appreciate Paris Martineau, Micah Sargent, Devendra Hardawar, Jason Snell, all of whom covered for me during my vacation. Thank you for doing such a great job. Some really good shows this week, and I had zero to do with it. I was on the beach the whole time.
Oh.
Aw. Was that an aw?
Yeah, I would love to go on the beach. It's 40 degrees in Boston.
Oh, yeah, you're
right
getting
now.
a second snow.
Oh, it's 35.
Second
35,
winter.
actually. Yeah.
I am so sorry.
Yeah, the first awe was a sympathy. Oh, poor Leo missed all this. The second awe was a lot more self-directed.
That's right.
Well, I hope
Why do I live in the Commonwealth?
I hope you warm up a little bit. We did. We talked to Cory Doctorow and a few other sci-fi authors because I really wanted to get them on. But fortunately, we have somebody here who can talk about one of the greats passed away this week, Vernor Vinge, at the age of 70. Is that right? Let me do some math. 80 years old. He was the author of so many great science fiction books, but perhaps even more importantly, remembered as the guy who created the idea of a singularity. He just a fascinating writer. If you haven't read any of Vinge's stuff, you should. But he was the first science fiction author to write about the idea that an AI could perhaps become as smart as a human being. I'm not sure where he wrote about that. You exchanged emails with him, Rob.
Very briefly. It was in 2009. It was writing a piece for the Washington Post about the concept of augmented reality.
You see?
15 years before Apple got around to putting Vision Pro on the market. And somebody pointed out to me that there's a novel by Vinge, Rainbow's End, which describes a world in which people are walking around with overlays generated by computerized contact lenses and clothing. And I thought, I should email this guy for a comment. What the hell? And he actually emailed me back. I updated the blog, and he talked about, I think, overlays depend on improvements in two technologies: wearable display devices, still working on it. We do not have the smart contact lenses. Accurate location and direction of look information. We're kind of there on the second one, where you can pin down your location to a very precise degree, and these devices do know which way you're looking. And so he emailed me. This was, again, in 2009. Probably thought mass market versions would come around 2012, 2017. And he noted Rainbow's End, based on an earlier story, Fast Times at Fairmont High from 2001.
I love the name.
So pretty good tech pundit, like good futurological work.
He wrote a op-ed piece in Omni magazine in January 1983. In which he talked about AI. We are caterpillars, soon to be butterflies, and when we look to the stars, we take that vast silence as evidence of other races transformed. This is where he talked about the singularity, technological unemployment. This is in 1983. A Cro-Magnon brought into our present could eventually understand the changes of the last 35,000 years. The difference between contemporary man and the creatures who live beyond the singularity is incomparably more profound. Even if we could visit their era, most of what we see would be forever incomprehensible. He says, let me give you his definition. The evolution of human intelligence took millions of years. we will devise an equivalent advance in a fraction of that time. We will soon create intelligences greater than our own. When this happens, human history will have reached a kind of singularity. As far as I know, the first time that term was used, an intellectual transition as impenetrable as the knotted space-time at the center of a black hole, and the world will pass far beyond our understanding. This is, by the way, what a lot of AI accelerationists are telling me today, is that it's going to get very weird very fast. The singularity, Vinge says, it already haunts a number of science fiction writers. It makes realistic extrapolation to an interstellar future impossible. To write a story set more than a century hence, one needs a nuclear war in between to retard progress enough so that the world remains intelligible. He believed the singularity. Now, remember, he's writing this in 1983. He believed the singularity would happen sometime in the next 20 years, between 1983 and 2023, and certainly before 2030. So maybe he wasn't so far off. A wonderful science fiction author. I think to some degree a really important thinker as well. And, you know, I wish he'd had more time to write. Vernor Vinge passed away this week at the age of 79. Falling into the singularity is admittingly a frightening thing, he says. But we now might regard ourselves as caterpillars who will soon be butterflies. I hope that's the case. I think there are a lot of people who think that AI is not gonna do that. We tried to get a hold of John Scalzi as well. He wrote a very good piece, which I recommend in his blog, whatever.scalzi.com, memorializing Vinge. David Brin was the first to announce it in a Facebook post. 3-time Hugo Award winner for Best Novel, Fire Upon the Deep, A Deepness in the Sky. R.I.P. Vernor Vinge. And on that note, I think we can say R.I.P. to This Week in Tech for this week. Anyway, Brianna Wu, your husband writes sci-fi.
He sure does.
Was he a Vinge fan, do you know?
I have not asked him. I will ask as soon as this show is over. I shout out to File 770, which covered it. Written by Mike Glyer. This guy is a one-man press shop for the entire science fiction industry. He gets. It's just amazing. To literally be the only industry press of a lot of the stuff. It's really.
What is the website?
File 770. It's in our notes today. So.
File770.com.
Okay.
That's it.
Good. This is good to know about. I will add this to my regular.
Mike is great.
Yeah. He writes mostly about sci-fi or SF fandom.
He basically he writes about fandoms. All of the the Sad Puppies came out. He covered it. He covers out books. He covers deaths. He covers big contracts. He's just he's the Washington Post of the science fiction writer industry. It's really cool stuff.
Wow. Great. I'm glad to follow this. Let me add this to my RSS. I hope he has RSS. Let me add this to my RSS feeds. Brianna Wu, Executive Director of Rebellion PAC. What's Rebellion PAC?
We basically work on election strategy. I personally work with a lot of streamers and try to get political messages out on new mediums. So that means TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, all that kind of good stuff. Kind of the good side of information warfare, if you will.
Nice. And of course, Princess Peach speedrunner. Where can we find your latest speed run?
If you want to follow me on Twitch, it's Brianna Wu on Twitch. I will be there speedrunning the new game, Princess Peach Showtime, quite a bit. I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, good. Yeah. It's Brianna Wu?
Brianna Wu?
It's easy to remember. Brianna Wu. You don't mean Brianna Wu. You mean
No, it's you gotta get passion. Come on.
Brianna Wu. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Brianna. Always great to see you. I hope we come out and see you in September. I'm looking forward to it.
We got a party.
Not just September, April, next month.
I'm going to destroy you at Godzilla Pinball, just so you know.
Yeah.
It's going down.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Here she goes. Here she goes, ladies and gentlemen. Princess Peach. She's on her way. I love it. I love it. Cathy Gellis, she is an attorney at law, CGCOUNSEL.com. She's also Cathy Gellis, CATHYGELLIS on Mastodon.
And also on Blue Sky.
Are we all moving to Skeet?
I'd been slow too because I kind of believed in the Mastodon model and I wanted it to succeed.
I won't give up.
Blue Sky was a client on my NetChoice cases amicus brief, so it's not like I don't like them either.
Well, and Masnick is a big Blue Skyer.
And he's, but I don't think he has Mastodon hate. He definitely likes a lot about the Blue Sky model, and
it's the closest to Twitter. Mastodon is not trying to be another Twitter. Blue Sky is the closest thing to a Twitter replacement.
If we hadn't had a Blue Sky, we probably would have evolved the Mastodon ecosystem a little bit more, but there ended up being another off-ramp, and that off-ramp had some appeal sooner, but it's where I'm spending most of my time, so I probably should change that, but I haven't done one of the custom domain names yet, so at the moment. But my handle, Cathy Gellis, I'm trying to own all the Cathy Gellises, and I think I have, and I feel bad for the one other woman who may also be named Cathy Gellis, because I got them, and I don't know. Having said that, somebody's probably going to, if it's not one I've been to, it's not me, but anyway, but the Twitter and the Blue Sky and the Mastodon.
Actually, Threads this week really opened up.
I'm not on Threads, crap. If you see a Cathy Gellis there, it's not me.
No, don't get on Threads. But because that's a Meta product, but they did just open up ActivityPub subscriptions to Threads.
I think we alluded to it in our amicus brief about, ecosystem is important, and that really needs to change, the legal analytical model of, okay, if all you had was Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc., maybe you would find that certain First Amendment incursions were more warranted, but as long as you can get other stuff that can talk to each other and take the open standards, I think that needs to be a regulatory guidepost, and I think definitely a constitutional guidepost.
To paraphrase Humphrey Bogart, we'll always have Truth Social.
Sure.
He never said that.
Yeah. I think you just violated the Elvis Act with that.
Yeah. The state of Tennessee is going to be on you.
Badly. Unless I'm an AI, I think I'm off the hook. Rob Pegoraro has his own handle on the Blue Sky.
RobPegoraro.com. Registered
That's pretty cool.
A long time ago. Yeah. So I do like that feature. Yeah, I spent a lot of time experimenting on Mastodon as well. Blue Sky has an approachability that Mastodon doesn't, even though I like the composition UX on Mastodon better. I like that there's an edit button that exists and that is easy to use. But yeah, I'm definitely Twitter after Alex Jones. I'm like, I cannot support this site with free writing.
No more Twitter.
And also,
you're still a Twitterer, though, aren't you?
I know. Stop
gotta get you off there.
18,000 followers. I had much less to
I have
walk away from.
150,000 followers.
I have 550,000, and I left.
Yeah.
If I could do it, you can do it.
Oh, and by the way, somebody in the Discord is saying that I'm on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, so that is not me. So.
But there is a Cathy Gellis.
I have a TikTok account, which I have not. Do you want to see me sing or dance? Absolutely not.
No.
Actually, I have thought about having a TikTok account, but I want it on essentially an isolated device, not my real device, and I've never managed to just organize
I have TikTok
one.
on all my devices. What is the Chinese government going to find out about me that I care about? They can just watch the show and they'll know everything there is.
In theory, have a lawyer and ethical duties to be a little less about my devices.
Oh yeah. Not me, thank God. I have no fiduciary responsibility to absolutely anybody. Although I have to say, Lisa ambushed me on our vacation. I'm lying on the beach. She said, let's do a TikTok on what you think of the Apple lawsuit. So what? I don't even know. I don't know anything. I know nothing. Truthfully, I really passed the buck because I don't want to have an opinion by myself. I want to listen to all you smart people and then decide.
Yeah, but some of us hadn't done the homework. So.
Yeah, Cathy. I'm sorry. Yeah, Cathy. Come on. That's all right. You read the Skeets.
I read the Skeets.
Rob, where else can we? I see you writing for the New Republic, of course.
Well, that was the one piece of soul there.
Thing.
It helped that a friend of mine was guest editing at that particular month.
But where else can we see your stuff?
Most often place to find me writing is PC Mag. I also write for Fast Company. There's a couple of guides I maintain at the New York Times Wirecutter site. I write for various trade
what do you do for Wirecutter?
The phone plans guide is my fault.
Phone plans?
Yes.
That's important.
It's a lot of math. Really, I'm risking a lot by taking it on. Yes.
Yeah.
No, there is a huge spreadsheet.
Huge
where I'm like, if you need to use
is
this
there a
much
clear
data,
winner?
For most people, I think in terms of if you use a lot of data, and certainly if you travel internationally, T-Mobile has got a great value proposition.
Yeah.
We judge that if coverage is your priority, especially rural coverage, if you want to drive like too far north of these studios, T-Mobile, you may find its network a little disappointing.
It's gotten better, though.
Yeah.
It's gotten better.
AT&T is a little better in that respect. Yeah. One thing we're going to have to sort of watch out for, T-Mobile and AT&T are both working to introduce roaming via satellites in low Earth orbit.
Wow.
So that could change the whole picture. It'll be a fun update.
What will the performance be like?
We'll have to see. AT&T is working on a system where their partner company, AST Space Mobile, only 90 giant satellites in low Earth orbit, they say will allow global coverage, data included. T-Mobile is partnering with Starlink, SpaceX, and then it's going to be messaging first, then voice and data, probably not at an awesome speed.
So this could be a revolution in mobile connectivity.
You'll never have an excuse for being offline.
This was always my hope. In fact, one of the reasons I was a big Starlink supporter in the early days was I thought, well, this is going to provide low-cost global internet, but it's not low cost.
No.
And that's the problem. So maybe it'll be from the carriers in the long run. We'll see.
We'll have to see. It's an exciting story to follow.
Not known for their low-cost offerings, however. Maybe T-Mobile.
We'll have to wait and see.
I always recommend Mint Mobile, our sponsor, if you're not traveling internationally, because that's cheaper than T-Mobile, but it is domestic only.
Yes.
So that's the drawback.
They've got some great prices.
Yeah. Rob, great to have you. He is robpegoraro.com as a skeeter. There's his little skeet. I really hate the word skeet.
Me too.
It sounds like
so bad.
A mosquito bite, kind of.
Yeah,
like,
and living in the Mid-Atlantic, I don't like mosquitoes.
I don't like mosquitoes.
I got a real detest of.
Yeah. We got to work on something else. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We do This Week in Tech Sundays. I think of it as my first podcast of the week and the last word in tech from 2 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's 5 to 8 p.m. Eastern time, 2100 UTC. You can watch us do it live. We have a YouTube stream at youtube.com/twit. Follow it there if you want to only participate with the live show. But honestly, it's probably more convenient, especially if you've got a Monday morning commute, to subscribe in your favorite podcast player. And that way you can download it and listen at your leisure. You can also get it from our webpage and from YouTube. There's a video channel dedicated to This Week in Tech. If you're not yet a club member, can I importune you to become one? It makes a big difference in our ability to continue to grow, to keep doing the shows we're doing, and perhaps even add shows. Club Twit is only $7 a month. For that, you get, I think, quite a bit. Ad-free versions of all of our shows, video of all of our shows as well. We've recently made the audio for everything available to the public, but the video is on club members' terms only. You also get bonus content we don't put out anywhere else, like Stacy's Book Club and our little parties we have in studio. We're going to do an Inside Twit soon for club members. And the fabulous Discord, which is really the place to hang. If you are a geek, you will find much to talk about, not just the shows in our Discord. All of that for $7 a month. twit.tv/clubtwit. And of course, the most important thing is you're helping us stay afloat in an era where independent journalism is few and far between. It's getting more and more difficult to do that, and we think it's really important. So thank you in advance. Oh, I didn't tell you how. twit.tv/clubtwit. We've been doing this for a long time.
You know what I just realized?
What?
You know what I just realized? I have a bug in my Windows production machine. The reason I'm facing this wall today is because my $4,000 computer doesn't work. I could go to Club Twit and probably
there are people in there.
Support.
You bet. There are people in there.
Oh, my God.
Who would gladly help you.
Please help me.
Help Brianna get her PC.
Yes.
Retcon5 says I could fix it. He is He is an IT guy for a very well-known company in the Bay Area. Keith512 says I could fix it. I know Keith can. He's one of our great resources. Lava Being says, okay, what's the problem? So yes, there is help in there.
I'm getting static through my XLR box for my mic. I'll talk to them about it.
Okay.
Oh my God, this is great.
Yeah, there's some great people in there, and of course, Brianna is a member of the club. In fact, Rob and Cathy, we also would like to extend complimentary membership so that you can go in there anytime you want. It's nice to have our experts in there. I was going to say that coming up, April 17th, well, there are a couple of things coming up. First of all, April 7th and April 21st, is that the 2 dates? We are going to open our studio to club members. So that's another benefit for club members. Now, I believe we're sold out for April 7th, but I think we have a few seats left for April 21st. I'll tell you what, best thing to do, club members, go into the club and look at the events, and you can sign up there. There's a form there. You can sign up so you can join us. Attend a live recording. Yeah, there it is, the 7th and the 21st. Let us know if you're interested. Space is limited. It is club members and their immediate families only. You could bring a spouse if they're not a club member. That's one thing I wanted to tell you about. What was the other one? Oh, in a couple of weeks, we're going to turn 19.
Ooh.
The show, first TWiT was April 17th, 2005. So in a couple of weeks, April 17th, I think we should have a party. We'll let you know. We're going to work on that. It's something to celebrate on the TWiT on April. I guess it'll be the 14th as we celebrate our 19th birthday, begin our 20th year of doing this show. And I thank those of you who have been listening for all 20 years. I thank those of you who have been listening for a few months or a few weeks. It's great to have you. And I will tell you, I will say this at the end of every show, as I have been for the last 19 years. Another TWiT is in the can. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.